Recovery. From Izuku's hospital bed, all he could see while scrolling through his highlights of the day was Stain's speech. Someone had recorded Stain's rundown before he was arrested and paired it with Stain's life. It started with Stain's backstory of his school life, how he got rejected from hero school, and summarized his vigilante actions, starting with petty crime to the pro-hero killings. It ended with his speech, followed by a narrator reading out his ideals and motives. And it resulted in a very viral video that news outlets were reporting on. And Izuku Can't Lie, the creator, did some nice editing with footage they scrambled together. Izuku watched with a blank face as everyone either praised or demeaned the hero killer, a figurehead or the beginning of a new wave of villainy. And the hospital food was not helping to distract him, even though the chicken was grilled to perfection with a nice size of rice to the side. He hoped he would get more fruit, but the meal was filling. Shoto flicked through the television channels and passed right by any news channel that even had a mention of the hero killer. Whether it be a graphic or words at the bottom, it was immediately passed over. The bandage in his face started lifting up at the edges from how much he was moving his face. There were bandages wrapped over Shoto's chest where Stain had stabbed him that were similar to the ones that Iida had on his arm. Iida was quiet as he watched the television screen when Shoto finally settled on the cooking channel where people were making illusion cakes to resemble some famous story from literature of their choosing. Izuku got off lucky with the scrapes and slices from Stain's blades, except for when it was almost infected because of an interning nurse student messing up a bit when cleaning out his wounds. After their lunch trays were taken away, the door swung open so fast it bounced against the wall with a loud bang. Iida's mother's glasses were crooked as she rushed into the room to head straight over to her youngest son. As Iida's mother immediately smothered him, Shoto's family rushed in with his mother in the lead with Taoya right behind her. Natsuo was right after them with Fayumi at the very end. "I can't believe both of my sons are in the hospital," Iida's mother fretted over his friend. Iida's face was smooshed from her hands inspecting his face. "Both of you are going to worry me to death." "Sorry, Mom," Iida replied, but it sounded more like thorry moan. His mother flicked his forehead in retaliation, then kissed the spot, which made his friends smile. While Rei and Fayumi were fretting over Shoto, Natsuo began asking about what to fill up a thank you basket with. Izuku laughed when Taoya started to push Natsuo's grinning face back from Shoto, who was listing all sorts of snacks and peanut butter treats for the police chief. Izuku felt his father's presence before he saw him at the foot of his bed. "Hello, my son," Nezu's eyes twinkle with mischief. "I'm assuming that you don't need any help hiding something from the masses given the fact that the hero killer is in custody." "I'm afraid not, Papa," Izuku replied, holding out his hand to grab onto his father's paw. "I see," Nezu said while gazing at the bandages around his arms. Nezu looked away to watch Iida and Shoto and the placement of their bandages. "Are all of you all right?" "I'm fine, Papa," Izuku replied. "It looks worse than it does," Iida answered from his bed with one of his hands in his mother's as she wiped away her tears with a tissue. Shoto shrugged then winced. He glanced up to see his older sister watching over him. "It feels a bit tight when I move." "Good, I'm glad that all three of you are okay and recovering," Nezu smiled. He hopped up into one of the metal hospital chairs beside Izuku's bed. He plopped down onto the cheap seat cushion. Nezu was acting really calm and quiet, right, which made Izuku squint his eyes in suspicion. He can only assume that Stain was going to get hit with something sooner or later. Taoya leaned on Shoto's bed. "You won't believe how fast Natsuo was driving to get here." "Yet he didn't miss a single sign," Rei praised. She looked over to Natsuo, who straightened up with an innocent grin like he was doing anything mischievous while looking up dog treats on his phone, although his speed was a bit over the limit. "Hey, at least we didn't run into any officers unlike." Natsuo slowly turned to his younger brother, who did not look amused. Shoto looked like he wanted to raise a particularly rude finger, but couldn't because of their mother standing right by the bed. After their family left, the three of them relaxed back in their beds. The family visit ended up with all of their beds pushed out from the wall more, but Izuku still pouted since both Shoto and Iida were next to each other while his bed was set up across from them. How is everyone else doing on their internships? Is anyone else in the hospital? Shoto asked. Both Ida and Shoto didn't make a move to look at their phones since they were both charging on the nightstand between them. Izuku reaches over to his phone that was charging right by his side. He searched through the group chat to see what everyone was doing. It doesn't look like anyone else got hurt like us. Suyu did her first real mission today where they arrested a whole ship of smugglers that they hunted down. Jiro got some pain relievers for her headaches, so most of her patrol is better now. Izuku hummed as he scrolled through the messages from the last 2 days. Hiroshima is doing good, Uraraka is praising her instructor, and Momo is still writing a lot of compliments on Aunt Midnight's work. Did they get the update about us? Iida asked, gesturing to the stark white room. No, let me tell them really quick. Izuku tapped the keyboard at a quick pace to explain what had happened to the 3 of them. Once he sent the text, there was immediate responses filling up the screen. Shoto and Iida's phones dinged several times at the same time each message came in. Izuku breathed in before slowly turning his phone on silent. Well, they know now. Shoto looked down at his phone that was constantly dinging with notifications. That's good to know. Izuku shrugged. He bit down on his lip as he thought about the 3 of them in the same room. It reminded him of Plan R of their separate murder plans where they run away and move together under an alias of aspiring college students. What do you think about all 3 of us becoming roommates after we graduate? That sounds great if we can afford an apartment soon after we debut, Iida replied. Shoto's interest was piqued. Could we get a cat? I have no problem with that, Izuku smiled. Iida, you okay with cats? I could take them on my morning jogs if I have time for my morning jogs by then, Iida answered. He hummed, I think that apartment idea is a good idea, something where the 3 of us can relax after our patrols. The talk about the apartment evolves into different conversations about what kind of pet would be better or what kind of decor they would have. That was until Shoto says something about probably being single until his 30s like Uncle Hisashi and Aizawa. You don't think you'll be married by 30? Izuku asked. Not really, Shoto answered with a shrug. Do you, Tenya? I'm not entirely sure. I feel like I will be more focused on my job as a pro hero to consider a relationship until I'm older than that, Tenya replied. His gaze landed back on him. Izuku? I don't think I could get close to marriage without Dad narrowing down my options before I even decide to talk with them. Izuku laughed a bit at his own words. Both of his friends looked at him with a tilt to their heads. Plus, I would have to be with them a long time, so I know completely that I could trust them the same way I trust in you too. Speaking of marriage, Iida's eyes started to twinkle again under the lights of the hospital room. His grin stretched across his face as Shoto's expression fell since he knew exactly where it was going. Shoto, did you start working on it? The 2 laughed as Shoto grabbed a pillow from behind him to groan into it. Izuku swore he heard Shoto mutter something about spider rings before he started to lose his breath from his laughter. The jail was not as big or intimidating as she thought it would be. The photos online presented this false image of some huge threatening building, yet the only thing she could point out was the plain cream color. However, the chipping paint on the bricks didn't hide the scuff marks and scratches behind the tall wired fence. She walked up to the door where 2 guards were waiting. Fayumi watched as one of them stepped forward. Ma'am, you shouldn't be here. I called ahead to schedule a meeting, Fayumi replied. The guard backed away while the other one shifted his feet. I wanted to visit my father, Todoroki Enji. Prison visit. The walls of the prison facility were bare of anything when Fayumi first walked in. Nothing but pale walls with large tiles lining the floor and simple light fixtures above that washed the yellowing paint job in bright white. The light felt shouldering as she walked underneath them, ignoring the buzzing of a few flies hovering above the light. What kind of things do you have here? Fayumi asked, looking around at the simple yet kind of creepy hallways. Maybe it was because she was a school teacher, but a hallway this boring was throwing her off. We have a library for some casual reading along with a schooling program to help some inmates do some general education associate's degree, one of the guards answered. Then he awkwardly laughed. All of the books are paperbacks though since someone beat another inmate with a hardcover of the Iliad. Fayumi's eyebrows rose up in surprise. That's pre-Quark era, correct? Yes, the other guard added. A lot of pre-Hearing era books find their way here since no one really reads them anymore. Fayumi was aware of that fact. A lot of books you could find only date back 200 to 300 years in the past. Anything older than that can only be found in big libraries in old forgotten sections. She doesn't know why. Some of the books she found were really intriguing stories. The nicer guard smiled. We have a few good programs here to help some of the inmates. Like some of them do arts and crafts to send back to their families. Arts and crafts does my father participate in any of these programs? I think he does. The guard paused before looking at the more stern-looking one. Doesn't he? The serious guard took a moment to answer. I have only seen him in arts and crafts as well as the therapy program, although I'm not sure how often he is part of them. Therapy, huh? Fayumi bit down on her lip. What kind of crafts does the prison have? Just simple ones. They mostly like to make little bracelets and jewelry for their family back home. The guard crossed his arms behind his back. If they have no one to send it to, the prison donates them to some charities in the city. I forgot which ones. Before Fayumi could ask anything more, the serious one interrupted them. We're here. Wait inside here. We'll make sure the inmate is escorted here in a short period. From there, you will have 1 hour to talk. Fayumi nodded, walking into the basic visiting room. When she walked in, it felt like a guidance counselor office back at the school she worked at. The room was small, with a simple window with bars on the outside that provided natural daylight into the room. The light bounced off the glossiness of the table where 4 chairs were set up. Fayumi swallowed, looking to the door nervously before sitting down in one of the chairs. She looked down at the chair closest to the wall and slowly pushed it in further under the table. It took several minutes before the door opened again, with her father being escorted by 2 guards. Fayumi tried to hide her surprise at the look of her father. Not surprisingly, it seemed like her father kept in shape in prison except for his torso area, which has considerably grown a little softer. His face was unshaven, yet his hair was much like his old hairstyle, if not a little flatter. And the shocked expression on his face was something that she doesn't remember seeing. His father stepped forward, stumbling into one of the chairs across from her. He stared at her before saying, Fayumi. Fayumi heard the door close. She glanced to see the 2 guards standing outside the door through the little window. She sighed, Hello, father. The look on her father's face didn't change. It wavered slightly on the edges of his lips for a brief moment. I didn't think anyone would come. Well, I'm here for now. Why did you come? Her father asked. She sighed, I need to talk with you about something. Fayumi slammed her phone down onto the table, sliding the screen to him so he could read the headline. She watched his eyebrows furrow down at the words. Do you know anything about this? Her father was silent as his eyes trailed over the words, his lips moving like he was silently saying every word without any sound. He replied, The Hero Commission say that they need my help. They say once the threat is gone, then I would no longer be needed and I would come back here. Did you agree? Fayumi tilted her head. Because the amount of articles I have been trying to avoid are just doubling in amount. Her father looked over to the side. I said that I would think about it when they first came. You didn't immediately agree. I thought you would be jumping at the chance to try and take All Might's spotlight. Her father shuddered. I know what will be waiting for me as soon as I walk through the doors of this place. Nezu is more sadistic than you think he might be. Do you want to know what I think of this? He shrugged without even looking at her directly. I feel like you are going to tell me anyway, Fayumi. I think the fact you're entertaining the idea is bullshit because of the fact you will ruin our life yet again. She could remember her mother's crying face. Sure, Endeavor was a good hero. He wasn't good with socializing with any fans he had, but he got the job done quickly. Yet Todoroki Enji wasn't a hero to his family or a father. You know, Fayumi shook her head as the older memories resurfaced in the face of her father's defeated face. I remember when you were actually a father, when Mom wasn't afraid of you, when Taoya actually wanted to spend time with you. The past where she was only a small girl while her older brother was dancing around her laughing father. Back then, her brother wasn't afraid to playfully punch their dad's arm since it only resulted in a tickle attack. Something innocent. I didn't think of you training Taoya to be such a big deal since you seemed so worried about his body not matching with the intensity of his quirk. I thought you were helping and that he was getting better, and I think it started that way. That's what I honestly think from what I remember. Taoya would get burns, but you would actually help him by bandaging them. She remembers how often she would see those used bandages crumpled up beneath the toilet paper rolls and used floss in the bathroom trash can. But it started to change when Natsuo was born. You started to change for the worse, Fayumi continued as her memories started to flood in. The look on her father's face grew more jaded as he was left behind by the growing crowd of All Might supporters. The father she knew was slowly becoming more distant. Suddenly Mom started acting more hesitant towards you and Taoya wanted to train by himself without you. But you kept trying to do something, to push something to happen. I started to help our mother more with any chores she would do around the house to calm her down because she just looked scared. Then I heard you arguing with Mom during the night and Taoya during the mornings. I started to hide away Natsuo each time you came home. I noticed Taoya going out of his way to push himself more when you weren't home to help and he just got hurt worse as you started to ignore him. Then Shoto was born. Taoya tried to attack him out of jealousy as soon as he saw his pouty little baby face. It resulted in the worst screaming match she had ever witnessed. When Shoto was born, you changed for the worse, and Taoya did too. Fayumi swallowed as she remembered just how distant her older brother had become during that time. Do you know how many times I had to stop him from running himself into the ground because he was miserable that you didn't pay him any attention? He started to act out because he wanted your eyes on him. The only time it worked was when he tried to hurt Shoto out of jealousy. I remember that day since I was protecting Natsuo from hearing Taoya shout when you dragged him outside. And no matter how hard I hoped and prayed that you would go back to how you were, you never did, and I knew there was no longer a piece of the father that I grew up with anymore as soon as Shoto got his quirk. Fayumi sighed, her eyes starting to water up when she thought back to the first time Shoto ever came into her room with tears' eyes. You started to train him more than you did with Taoya, obsessing over this title that All Might has. Mom was breaking down, Natsuo became quiet, Taoya was in a bad mood most of the day, and I had to be the one who took care of it all, Fayumi shouted at her silent father. I had to be a parent at 11. Do you understand that, Dad? You forced me into the role of a parent to my own mother and siblings all because of you and your actions. Fayumi paused to breathe, wiping away any tears that had escaped down her face. She saw him hesitate with his fingers twitching. She looked down at the table between them. All I wanted was for us to be a happy family again, but we only got that after the trial when the rest of us were free from you. The real reason why Taoya became a hero was to be everything you weren't, and he is doing a damn good job at it, Fayumi smiled tightly. And Shoto is becoming a hero that I know is going to do great things without you. She collapsed back into her seat, leaning against the back of her chair. She sighed heavily. If you agree to this, all of us will be affected by your actions just like before, and I am not selfish when I say that. Shoto had a panic attack when the headlines first appeared. Natsuo was ready to come down on her and end it himself, and Taoya admitted to asking Hero Killer about making you his next target. And we have all been trying to keep this news away from Mom. Fayumi looked straight into the blue eyes that matched her oldest and youngest brother's gaze. In short, I want you to stay away from them. If I have to stop you, I will, and I won't let any early memories stop me from taking you down permanently. I understand, her father answered. She had just started to calm down her breaths when he spoke again. That's why I turned them down when they came back here again. What? Fayumi asked, her eyebrows raising in surprise. This jail has a counseling program. It was mandatory for me to come in each week, her father replied. Fayumi felt like she had gotten hit over the head and ended up in an alternate universe. And you actually went? He raised his cuffed hands. I didn't really have a choice, but they did help me narrow down some things about myself. I know that it is too late for apologies, but I will say that if I could turn back time, I wouldn't repeat my past actions. I can only grow from them, he answered, and I won't jeopardize my progress by accepting whatever deal the commission throws at me. She stared at her father for several minutes, or what felt like minutes since the silence dragged on for so long. So long she didn't notice the guard opening the door to give her a warning about her time. Your visiting time is up. Please wrap up your conversation. She apologized for the loss of her track of time when her father slowly straightened up in his chair. Are you going to visit again? Fayumi's mouth twisted with hesitancy. If he turned them down, then she would have no reason to keep visiting him. Then she looked at the weakened version of her father, unshaven and nothing like the monster she had seen before in the past. Has he really changed? She narrowed her eyes as she thought over her decision. Then she said, maybe, only because I need more answers from you. Then I'll be here, her father replied. She nodded to him and walked to the door where the guard was waiting for her, and as the door closed, she could hear her father's voice softly calling out to her, be safe. Incoming exam, suspicious bird, late visit. The week ended on a high note even though most of it was spent in the hospital to recuperate from the injuries. Manuel told both Iida and Izuku that if they wanted to return without any plans of murder, he would be happy to teach them more. And Dabai didn't need to push on Shoto since the entire family had done enough by burying him in worry and smothering. Dabai already promised to catch him up on new moves when he had enough time. Either way, school came quicker than they all thought as they passed through the gate together after spending most of their internship recovering. I wonder how much our class learned from the time away, Iida said. Shoto hummed in response with a shrug. I'm sure they learned more than we did, but that's a given. I think your Araka learned the most since she got lessons on physical fighting. So her fighting style I think has changed the most, Izuku recounted from the messages of the group chat he skimmed through the night before. A lot of their classmates got experiences in even the smallest ways in each of their internships. Suyu had a very intense mission compared to other smaller missions. Momo also had some lessons from Auntie Midnight. And if his explanation wasn't enough, the sight of walking into a classroom with Seiro and Kaminari laughing at Bakugo's gelled-back hairstyle while Uraraka displayed a fighting move against Ajiro had to be. Shinso was in the back of the classroom talking with Takami with a scarf similar to Aizawa's around his neck. Jiro was casually chatting with Momo, who had her hair down. The three friends didn't have enough time to chat before Eraserhead walked into the room, making everyone settle down in their seats. He cleared his throat. After classes today, you should all keep in mind that since the sports festival is over, the next thing on our agenda is the exams, both written and physical portions. Eraserhead paused as he took in the shocked and worried expressions across some faces. You will need to start preparing now because these tests will not be easy, so be logical and schedule your time accordingly. With that, Eraserhead left the class to talk as he kept himself occupied at his desk before classes officially started. Aw man, I completely forgot about it, Kaminari groaned. I think I'm in the really low ranks since I'm not really good at literature stuff. Same here, Seiro wearily added. English is kicking my butt right now worse than Ajiro did in quirkless training with Mr. Yagi. Sato pouted as he contemplated his own ranking in class. When I get stressed from homework, I just start baking, which makes me start baking so much I forget about studying. Then I get stressed about not studying, which makes me start the cycle over again. I would be more than happy to help, Momo commented, her dark eyes sparkling with determination. Anyone who needs help with tutoring can come to my house, and we can have tea while we study for our written exams. Kirishima jumped at his chance to head over to Bakugo, who was staring at him like he was daring him to try and ask. And despite the menacing aura radiating off of him, Kirishima slid an arm over his shoulder to cheerfully ask him to become his tutor. There was a pause before all three friends looked at each other from their seats. Even when Shoto and Tenya had tests to study for at their own school, Izuku would host study sessions at his own home for all three friends to study together. Izuku would study from his father's appointed studies and homework while his friends would look over their notes from their academy. Izuku scooted closer to them, getting out of his seat to get in the middle. My house. Like always, Shoto nodded exaggeratedly like Izuku didn't even need to ask to confirm the fact. Snacks. Iida pushed up his glasses, making them shine from the lights above them. I can get some variety that will provide the perfect combination of sweet, savory, salty, and healthy for us to enjoy. I could get some drinks for us and maybe bring some of Fayumi's shortbread cookies, Shoto responded. He brushed a piece of hair out of his face as he said, she made a huge batch recently for her class to celebrate their good behavior. Sounds perfect, Izuku smiled, rushing back to his seat when Aizawa looked up. He flashed a guilty look his way, making his uncle roll his eyes at him before the bell rang. The crunchy fried chicken skin taste was still lingering on his tongue with his hand cramped up from signing autographs. Yet here he was again after an uneventful visit last time. UA still stood as strong as Hawks last saw it before the sports festival. And now he was there again because the hacker attacked the commission again, and they still weren't fast enough to stop it before the hacker got into his own programs folder. They weren't there long before they left the server again, but it was enough to have everyone on edge. The head of the commission was already talking about moving everything off the old server and just making a whole new system that could be locked down from any outside source. Yet ever since he learned that, his feathers have been on edge. Someone out there knew what he was and who he used to be. And he couldn't live with that. He marched through the halls when he knew the rest of the students were having lunch. At least he thought all of the student body would be at lunch. The one outlier to his original thought was currently walking down the hall with several places in his shirt torn with a few burnt edges. The familiar freckled face glanced up at him, then waved at him. "What are you doing out here? Shouldn't all the UA students be at lunch?" Hawks asked. "I help my friend in support class during lunch sometimes. I think you met her before the last time," the green-haired kid answered. "What was his name again?" "Midoriya. I get her snacks when she forgets to eat and she lets me use her prototypes that don't explode, so I feel like it's a pretty fair deal." The kid leaned forward with a smile. "What are you doing here? I thought you would be on patrol already, chicken wing." Hawks barked out a laugh. "You got that from the DJ Mouse show yesterday night, huh?" "Yeah, I think it's pretty fitting," the kid replied. "Well, I'm on a secret hero business that I don't need any students poking their head into." Hawks lowered his voice as he walked with the kid following after him. "Some missions I'm part of are too dangerous for the untrained eye." Midoriya looked down the hallway and back to him. "Did you need help getting to the principal's office again?" His tone dropped lower yet still held a more humorous tone. "For this super secret important hero business." "I'm sure I have the route by now," Hawks hummed as he walked with Midoriya trailing behind him. "Hey, the work studies happened last week. Were you part of one?" "Yeah, I was," the green-haired kid shrugged. "I was with Manuel and Hasu with one of my friends. It could have been a bit better if I wasn't in the hospital for most of it." "Ooh," Hawks said with a wince. The Hasu attack was bad with Nomus all over the place and Stain somewhere in the middle of it all. The casualty rate was relatively low compared to the amount of property damage in that area. That attack was pretty bad since it really came out of nowhere. Are you feeling better?" "Oh yeah, I'm all healed from that. I got a little too close to the action when I shouldn't have." Midoriya turned his gaze away from him and to the floor. "But I had to help out my friend so he wouldn't get hurt." "I get that," Hawks nodded. He could appreciate a hero student who looked out for others. "You were looking out for your partner in the field, which is a good trait to have. No one wants someone who would abandon them in the fight." "Now I should get to my meeting with Nezu. You should head on back to lunch and hang out with your friends," Hawks grinned, placing his hands behind his neck. "Do whatever youngsters your age do." Midoriya snorted. "You're barely older than me." "Yes, and I am wiser because of it." Hawks smiled and waved the kid towards where he thought the cafeteria should be. He only got the kid laughing at him as an answer. "Now shoo." "All right," Midoriya shrugged with a smile. "Have a good day, chicken wing Hawks." "Right back at you, Freckles," Hawks added as the student jogged back in what he assumed to be the direction of the cafeteria. Or maybe they were heading back to that support girl. Either way, he navigated his way back to the principal's office where Nezu was waiting with a steaming cup of tea on his office desk. "Hey Nezu, how's it hanging?" Hawks greeted casually as he walked up to the seat across from Nezu's desk. "About as well as it could be since the last time we met," Nezu responded with his signature smile. "I'm sure you're here again because of your ongoing investigation into the stranger in the commission's servers." "Yep," Hawks replied in English, popping the P. "Have you collected any information on your end, or do you have any clue as to who they may be?" "The person you are trying to track covers their tracks very well. I'm sure I could catch them if I wrestled the hacker into a game of online chess," Nezu replied with an easy tone like the threat of a hacker didn't faze him. Hawks glanced behind Nezu's chair to see a sculpture he didn't see before the last time he visited. The sloppy painting job of the clay was unmistakably done by a child. "Hey, what's that behind you?" Hawks saw Nezu's paw ticking upward just a bit. "You got a little fan?" "Yes, it seems like I do." The gift gesture was thoughtful. Nezu turned his chair to allow Hawks to see more of the small sculpture on the bookshelf behind him. It looked like a long mouse with a crown on their head. "So what did you need from me on this lovely visit?" Nezu continued on without pausing, sipping at his tea. "Next time, you should give me more time to prepare. I could have set up some snacks." After an inconclusive questioning, Hawk said goodbye with a smile towards Nezu and kept the grin until he walked through the gates. That's when he finally let his expression drop as he took off into the sky. The words from a conversation he overheard 2 weeks ago rang through his head. I heard Rocklock got a basket from Nezu for his kid. That's nice of him. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because he has a bit of experience with that. Nezu has a kid. That's the age-old rumor, but I think it's more of a personal student thing. It's like how you call your interns your kids sometimes. With Nezu being as smart as he is not the type to slip up. He still remembers how the principal was caught off guard only for that half second before recovering seamlessly. Anybody who wasn't trained on those minuscule expressions wouldn't have seen his hesitance. Maybe he needs to visit a bit more because reporting back to the Hero Commission on his findings. That way he can actually figure out if Nezu has a personal student or an actual kid he has been keeping a secret from the Hero Commission, and where they are hiding. And if Nezu was as smart as he would hide him right in plain sight where no one would suspect it. All Hawks had to do was find him. The grass was greener than any other park he had been to before. Bouquets of flowers, fresh and dead, lay at the feet of the stones carved with names and memories. The smell of burnt incense still lingered in the air with one of 2 people kneeled down in other areas. I'll be in the car for a few minutes to give you some time alone, Nezu said in a softer tone which made it sound more like a whisper. Izuku nodded at him and gently shut the car door behind him. The teen turned back to the cemetery with a determined expression. The grass crunched under his feet as he walked the exact path that Aunt Mitsuki had listed down on paper in the album he received. It wasn't like until he found the familiar name etched into stone he was looking for. Midoriya & Co. A loving wife, mother, and friend, a gentle life gone too soon. Izuku breathed in as he kneeled down to his mother's grave. In silence, he lit a stick of incense and breathed in the vapor from the smoke rising into the air. With a deep, steady breath, he said, "Hi, Mom." The voices of other visitors at the cemetery were muffled as he focused on the site in front of him, with the stone looking more pristine than the darker gray stones around him. I'm sorry for not showing up for 15 years, but in my defense, I didn't know much about you. And I've never been to a cemetery before, so there are 2 firsts for me happening today. Izuku tried to smile to brighten the mood, only to let it slowly drop back into a calm line. I'm not sure what to talk to you about. Should I tell you about my day, or my life? Where do I even start? Izuku's words were rushed as he tried to come up with anything to say to the grave in front of him. He came prepared for this day. He planned out the entire event. His father would drive him to the site, he would pay his respects and talk to her for a bit before going to dinner at one of the places his auntie told him about. A place that his mother used to love. God, what could he tell her? I'm a DJ. I'm a hero in training. I have a family filled with heroes. I started to watch your favorite movies that auntie told me about in the album. I'm pouring through this album to see what we would have in common. I'm trying to find out if you would even like the person I turned into. I'm trying to see if we are so alike as auntie thinks we are, since why would I be compared so much to you if that wasn't true? This is so hard. Why is it so hard? This is so weird, Izuku admitted out loud as warmth spread over his cheek, dripping off his chin into the grass below his hands. I never have met you before this, but I'm crying. Why am I crying so much? The stone didn't reply. He sniffled. I heard from Auntie that it was titled The Midoriya Tears. Did you cry as much as I do? Even when everything is going fine, did you still cry? Because I do. You know, I have been hesitant to use Midoriya as part of my name. I thought it belonged to the one who abandoned me. It wasn't until Auntie told me more about you that I found out that it belongs to you. Izuku smiled at the stone, brushing his hands over the carved name. He traced the kanji of Midoriya and said, maybe now I can use it with more confidence. He took a long moment to recompose himself in front of the stone. The time passed slowly until the incense stick was close to burning out. Izuku waited until his tears stopped for him to start talking again. God, I want to tell you everything. I was raised by my dad, who didn't hesitate to take me in and raise me with all kinds of love and support. I have 2 best friends that mean the world to me. I have a big family of heroes that were around me growing up. I'm training to be a great hero that others can count on and my family can be proud of. Izuku grinned as the last of the incense stopped smoking. I hope you would be proud of who I am becoming if you were here. With that, Izuku bowed low to the gravestone in front of him and whispered his promise to return into the earth. He walked back to the car where his father was patiently waiting for him. He stifled a laugh at his father's disguise. It was normal when his father was outside to put something around his head to stop anyone from recognizing his familiar face. But the floppy black beach hat was a bit too funny to not stifle a laugh at. Izuku climbed inside the passenger seat as his father looked up from the thriller novel he was reading. He hummed as his father placed his bookmark between the pages. Is this one any better than the last? Worse, I can tell the sister has been setting it up from her introduction. Nezu slid the small novel into the middle console. Authors nowadays put no real effort into making a plot twist worth my time. Izuku gazed at the cemetery as his father started the engine again and rolled up his window. He looked up at the security cameras set up on top of poles and felt himself lean back away from the window. Hey, Dad. Izuku rubbed his hands over his mouth, making his words muffled through his hands yet covered his lips as he said, "When Hawk saw it, you hesitated, right?" Just enough, Nezu confirmed as he pulled away from his parking spot. His mother's grave waved goodbye to him from the rear-view mirror as his father asked, "Shall we have some fried chicken for dinner?" Unseen scene from the rescue retake from the OVA. I deleted the scene since I forgot to write the rest of the chapter, because I scrapped the OVA chapter, but have this small scene of the teachers berating All Might for his plan. To anyone who doesn't know the context, in an OVA, All Might thought it was a good idea to dress like a villain and scare all of them into thinking another villain attack happened during a regular hero exercise. Just bring it up to Izuku not as a student, but as your help. Nezu and all of us have taught him many things. Hound Dog taught him about certain things that he may encounter as a hero, like trauma, Midnight answered. So either go straight to Hound Dog or have Izuku or Nezu of all people give some advice on how to handle the situation in the correct way. I will give my own advice here, 13 remarked. If you want to stick with your villain plan, you must be upfront with the students about you taking on the role of the villain in the exercise. Don't let them believe that an actual villain broke in again. 13's right. They turned to see Hound Dog marching straight towards the coffee machine with his spotted mug. He growled, "You don't want kids to experience something like that, especially so quickly after an event like that happened." Toshinori nodded to himself. I admit it made more sense in my head. But the way you all broke the plan down, I can see that it would probably cause more harm than good. I have no doubt that the teens will try and fight you afterwards if you try to pull that on them, 13 joked. Izuku wouldn't even participate, but he will give you the most disappointed look that makes you wish he would fight you instead. Don't remind me of his disappointed look, it's even worse than Night Eyes. Toshinori coughed, gulping down the water in his large mug. Exams. As soon as the announcement about the exams happened, the class was scrambling around. People grasped onto each other to find some semblance of a study group inside the classroom. Mono took a large number of students under her wing, much to her delight, as she started planning a huge study gathering at her home. Kirishima got Bakugo to agree to tutor him, even though the study sessions were particularly loud, shouted instructions piercing through the air, followed by Kirishima asking him to repeat it. He got several messages from Bakugo given their weird friendship standing right now. All of the message had caps lock as he somehow complained yet kind of praised Kirishima at the same time in an unintended way. The class group chat dwindled as others started separate chats for their study groups. Mina was the most recent message with a selfie of her and Kaminari with Ajiro in the background at Momo's house with a fancy setup of food and homework scattered on the table behind them. Can you stop looking at the chat so we can all study this? Shoto asked before throwing an octopus-shaped hot dog into his mouth. His head leaned against his hand while he was laid out on his stomach with his notes under his nose. It was no surprise that he and his best friends had teamed up as a study group even though they didn't really need to. They all studied well on their own already and they were all part of the top 10. But it was fun to get together to study, especially at Izuku's house. Did your dad tell you anything about the other part of the exams? Shoto asked, his eyes trailing from his English workbook to his eyes. Mina has been saying that the upperclassman she talked to said it was something. Shoto pursed his lips as his gaze flickered down to the snacks in the middle of them. I forgot what she was saying. She said the upperclassmen said we would have to fight robots, Tenya replied, not looking up from his work as he picked up his notebook to place it on his crossed legs. He flicked his gaze over the rim of his glasses. Maybe you didn't hear because you started focusing more on your cold soba halfway through. Shoto blinked then hummed, "That makes sense, lunch rush makes good cold soba." He popped another octopus-cut sausage into his mouth. Izuku answered as he placed down his English notes to pick up his art history pile. "My dad didn't tell me anything since, I'm in the class." Which means he doesn't need to tell you anything, but you probably have a few guesses as to what, Shoto said with a knowing look in his eyes. "Ah, you know me so well," Izuku responded with a grin. He hummed as he flipped to the oldest section of his notes. "I do have a few ideas of where this might go. As far as I can say, I trust you two will make it through with little to no problems. I have a few tricks up my sleeve as well to counteract whatever we might face." Iida hummed, "That's always nice to hear." "How's Uncle Tensei?" Izuku questioned as Iida pushed up his glasses to examine a highlight section of his notebook. Tenya sighed, "He's getting better slowly. Tensei is complaining about the shows he sees on the hospital TV. The doctors said that he will be rolling in a wheelchair after a few weeks or so." Izuku hummed, "We should visit again before we head to the training summer." "It depends on the day, but I think my mom could drive us," Shoto offered before frowning. He tapped his pencil against the notebook in a steady rhythm for a few moments. "Unless she is going to therapy that day." "How's Natsuo? I haven't heard from him," Tenya asked. "That's because he has a girlfriend. He's doing—" Shoto picked up a larger piece of sausage. "Couple stuff between his college classes. Last night he cooked dinner and made an extra portion just for her." Shoto then bit down on the sausage. "That's nice." "Fayumi," Shoto started to choke with harsh coughs. Tenya hurriedly thumped his back to clear his airway from the sausage block. Shoto cleared his throat, taking his thermos from Izuku's hands to gulp down some cooled water. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked Shoto. "Yeah, you don't have to worry that much." Shoto waved off his two-friend worries, relaxing his head into his palm again. "It wasn't like I was actually choking that hard." "What do you mean?" Izuku let a grin form on his face. "It's perfectly normal for fiancés to be worried about each other." "Oh my god," Shoto rolled his eyes then let his head fall into the open notebook. "I regret bringing that up." "Hello, boys." Izuku watched Shoto freeze as Tenya raised his gaze to their principal and uncle standing near them. They were both like statues. Well, they were more like the statue performers you could still see breathe and move slightly. If his father was near the rest of his class, then they would be as still as statues in a garden. Izuku noticed him out of the corner of his eyes as soon as Shoto started to cough. Nezu's head tilted as he gazed at Shoto with an unreadable smile. "What this I hear about an engagement?" Hi Uncle Nezu," Shoto coughed again, sitting up from his position on the floor. "How long have you been?" "Shoto, our home is not the size of a mansion. I could hear you from the moment you started your studying," Nezu replied, gesturing with a paw towards his bedroom. "I came over when I heard you coughing, but now my interest has been piqued. What were you talking about?" "Papa, Izuku knows his dad is already familiar with the fiancé situation. Yet he also knows by the little twitch of his lip that he finds putting Shoto on the spot quite humorous." Shoto glanced away then back to Nezu. It's a bit of a story from when we were kids." "Oh, so you didn't ask for my permission to marry my son for all these years?" Nezu questions, laying a paw on his chest. I thought I was hospitable enough for you." "No, it wasn't anything like that." Shoto shook his head furiously. Tenya fixed his glasses then exaggeratedly sighed. He rested a hand to his forehead and spoke up. "Uncle Nezu, it's even more terrible than you think." Shoto looked like a betrayed character in a tragedy play. "Tenya, why?" Tenya continued despite Shoto giving him pleading eyes. "He proposed to me a year after Izuku. I felt like the other man in the relationship." Oh, Nezu tilted his head the other way. "Please stop." Izuku watched Shoto rest his face in his hands, yet there was a twitch in the corner of his lips. Nezu said, "Shoto, you should have asked for Iida's family's permission as well, no matter your age." "I was still in the single digits and I didn't even know what marriage was," Shoto explained as Nezu watched him with a grin. Shoto sighed. "Uncle Nezu, stop teasing me. I get enough teasing about it from these two." Izuku bit down on a laugh as his father nodded. Next time you try, do it properly. You wouldn't want any bad in-laws." That made Izuku and Tenya laugh as Shoto sputtered at the sudden relationship advice. Nezu smiled when Shoto groaned. I ordered the three of you some food that should be arriving soon. Thanks, Papa. Thank you, Uncle Nezu, Tenya and Shoto said in unison. Take care of yourselves, I'll be in my room. Nezu turned on his heels to go back to his bedroom. I'm catching up to my shows. If you're staying overnight, make sure to tell your parents. I did, Tenya and Shoto replied at almost the same time. Izuku called back to his father again before a text chime came from his phone. He looked down to check the group chat yet again to see a new message. Oh look, Kirishima posted a selfie too. He says that he is studying like a man, Izuku said, turning the phone to the other two to show them. Shoto's head tilted to the side. Is that an explosion in the background? Remember who's his tutor? Tenya asked, eyes sliding over to where Shoto was laying. Shoto narrowed his eyes. Ah, Bakugo. Yep. The written exams were stressful to say the least for the class. Not Izuku though, he always had a history of finishing up assignments or tests first because of how quickly he could spew out the answers onto the page. But after the written exams were done, the next thing hovering over Class 1A was the incoming physical exams. Now Izuku had a few guesses as to what the physical exams would be since he knew that they were challenging them as first years since they experienced a villain attack so early. The physical exams would reflect that. Based on what Mina shared, the class assumed they would be fighting the robots from the entrance exam or something of that nature. It was because of some loose-lipped upperclassmen who dealt with them for their first-year physical exams. It was possible that could happen, but only if Power Loader programmed them harder than the ones they encountered before. But different things were possible as well. The robots could be controlled by the teachers to see how they would react to such a situation. They might be doing something similar to a rescue mission like the USJ was supposed to be with a giant city with the robots involved. Or it might not have robots at all. If anything, with how excited his father was acting, it seemed that the exams would be more involved than the class thinks it is. And that was exactly the case when all of the class showed up in their heroic costumes. The upgrades he was planning weren't finished yet, but he had all his gear to compensate for it. It was a debate whether to use his jetpack before he ultimately decided to bring it seconds after he considered whether or not to take it. Everyone was ready until his father popped out of Uncle Aizawa's scarf to announce they were all fighting their teachers. The class shock and fear only doubled once they saw the assigned matches light up on a screen above the gate the teachers were standing in front of. Nezu, Mina's horrid whisper only made him swallow down a laugh. Kaminari tapped his shoulder as visible sweat dropped down the side of his face. His face was desperate as he asked, Izuku, can you convince him to go soft on us? Ooh, Mina and Kaminari. He kept his tone apologetic as both of their shoulders dropped at the sound of it. It was nice knowing you. Dad takes this seriously. Even if he was paired against me, he would still not hold back that much. He would. Izuku knew his father would at least slow down his actions to test the skills he has learned. Yet there was something surprising about who he was set against. He could tell by a few of the teams that they were testing them individually and together as partners by the matchups against certain teachers, like Mina and Kaminari, who scored the lowest going against the smartest one there, which was his father, or how shy Koda has to go against Present Mike with Gyro. Why would I be paired against All Might with Bakugo? Izuku thought to himself as he ran over the possibilities in his head. Bakugo seems to be the hardest to handle in the class, so they could be testing our ability to work together. But we do have a bit of a lost bond between us because of the whole incident of supposed to be childhood best friends but I got adopted instead thing. He liked to think they were getting close to friends despite Shoto's desire to fight him. But with All Might, oh, it might be because he had a great family relationship with every teacher participating in the exercise. They might decide to go easier on Izuku even despite the need to treat him like an enemy. But it's All Might. He clashes with All Might often because of his forgetful attitude with his health and the other tendencies he tends to have. Izuku drags a hand down his face and prompts Shoto to glance over at him. Often or not, All Might would be intimidated by him at the least and immediately correct his wrongs. But he knows just how much All Might would take this seriously. He might even go a bit too far with his punches because of his quirk. He knows him far too well. If anything, this exercise is testing his ability to babysit Bakugo while going above and beyond with his intimidation skills and manipulation tactics. Yet despite it all coming together in his head, he still had a feeling in the back of his throat that he might be oversimplifying things. Final exams with Katsuki and Izuku. Izuku watched as everyone got paired up. Shoto teamed up with Momo against Uncle Zawa while Tenya was with Ajiro against Uncle Power Loader. Oh, he hasn't seen Power Loader in a fight for so long since he focuses more on his support gear work. He would need to hack into the exams videos to see it in action. Or ask politely once everything is as graded if he wanted to be more polite about it. Many others were teamed up, but the ones who looked the most stressed were undoubtedly Ashido and Kaminari, who kept glancing back at him. His father just smiled at him with unhidden glee once he caught his eye, clapping his paws together with joy. He could only hope that the two could outrun what his father had in store. Izuku knew that his papa could be very sadistic when fighting, even in these kinds of scenarios. He didn't even need to hear much about Endeavor's punishment when he saw that man's face and how overjoyed his father was the following days after it. And yet no one took the note to disadvantage All Might even more. His uncle was a lot of things. He had good intentions but was often forgetful most of the time at the sacrifice of his own health and well-being, a lesson he had to remind the old blonde of many times. But one thing about him stood above his kindness: his strength. From his time analyzing his power, One for All was not a quirk you could underestimate. It was a quirk passed down to a point where it became so strong that no normal human body could handle it without serious training to prepare it. And they decided to handicap the 8-generation-long quirk, which had the capability of punching through buildings and changing the weather in one punch. With only 4 suppression cuffs. Were they trying to kill them? All Might, remember what we talked about. He heard his papa say, a warning under his tone as All Might stiffened in his place with a strained grin on his chiseled face. Nezu snapped his fingers and explained to everyone as they were separated into their groups. The teachers acting as villains will have 10 minutes to get ready in their areas before the students would be sent in. The students acting as pro-heroes will either win by at least one of them retreating or for the student team restraining their villain. If the student team lost in the hero roles by either being restrained or unable to continue, they would lose the exam. May the exams begin shortly. I wish you the best of luck, Nezu said as some of the teachers started to whisper information to the children about which area they were fighting in. Mina and Kaminari looked so much more scared as Nezu's smile grew. I'll only need 5 minutes. I have everything I could possibly need, Nezu said, walking off to his examination area with the 2 students already silently praying for themselves behind him. All right, rookies, we're fighting in an urban city area. All Might commanded attention to his words, drawing both him and Bakugo into his explanation. Izuku watched intently as the pro-hero coughed into his fist to clear his throat before continuing. Just wait outside for 15 minutes, then you can go right in through the gate. All Might guided them to the gate where they stood under as the number 1 hero rushed inside to the skyscraper building waiting for them. Izuku turned to the fiery blonde who was adjusting the grenade gear on his arms. The blonde caught his eyes before tightening down a cap where he kept his explosive sweat. Izuku hummed, then decided to break the silence. Well, do you have any ideas on how to defeat the number 1 hero playing the number 1 villain? Bakugo scoffed as he rolled his shoulders, tilting his head back, making a cracking noise at the stretch. I'll blow him up then win. Wow, what a plan! Izuku paused, then sarcastically whispered under his breath, good for you. Looks like he would need to plan ahead of whatever impulsive moves his partner would make. But before he does anything, he needs to try and compromise an idea with him. Reasoning with the blonde was harder than he expected. Actually, that was a lie. He knew that Bakugo, no matter the growing connection with them because of the whole weird friendship thing they had going on, wasn't going to agree to easily. Izuku knew that the blonde was stubborn. But he could at least talk with him. He's walking away again like a stressed-out toddler marching away from their problems. Can't you just listen to me? Izuku asked, trying to keep his voice at a minimum. It would not do good to bring attention to their positions as they navigated through the alleyways of the fake city. You know that I have some valuable information. Like the valuable information that he drove through this fake city for his driving practice, and he knows the best places to hide if they want to sneak past into a retreat route, or best places to use to their advantage to restrain All Might. And he also knows where the little testing bots were stored away. One little hacking job and they can have some distractions or weapons on their side. Go ahead, keep up with your damn bragging. Bakugo's hands sparked through his gloves. He clicked his tongue. Let's see how far that gets you. Let's see how far your inability to willingly listen lasts for you. Izuku countered as the blonde continued to pursue on, ducking his head around the alley to peek down the empty street. Countless heroes have fallen and continue to fall because they don't listen in multiple kinds of situations. You think I care about those kinds of shitty extras? Bakugo glanced over his shoulder with a tilt of his head, his eyes piercing through the black of his mask. I'm going solo as soon as I get out, and I am going to win against every single damn villain. Izuku ran his hands down his gray hero costume top. The sleeveless version he was wearing was making his arms feel more exposed despite his capture scarf loosely wrapped around them like a fancy shrug. Why will you not listen to any plan I'm giving you? This would be much easier if Bakugo would just listen and give feedback on the plans he has. He has several made already in his head. I have several backup plans and I can change them up if you would just put in your input. Bakugo waved him off, the green and orange gloves flicking out at him. I can pass this test by myself. I don't need your help in the first place. I'll win without you. Wow, what an original response. Izuku slowly clapped 3 times, the sarcasm obvious in his voice as Bakugo glared back at him. Are those the things you want your action figure to say when kids twist your grenades? Bakugo remained silent as he slowly raised one of his fingers in a rude gesture, sticking his tongue out at him. The speaker, crackling to life, drew his attention away from his team partner. Kaminari Denki and Ashidomina have lost the exam. Oh, that didn't last long. I was hoping they would have stayed near the exit so one of them could retreat right away, Izuku commented as the speaker cut out. He turned back to Bakugo, only to not see him anywhere near him in the alley. Although he didn't have much time to reflect on that, they had a time limit of 30 minutes inside this battle simulation for the exam. Boom. And now he has a bigger problem. Izuku winced as he poked enough of his head to use reflection from the fake windows to see flashes of primary colors followed by the sound of crashing further down the street. I'm a villain, therefore collateral damage means nothing to me, All Might yelled out, throwing debris into another store, crushing the storefront and shattering the windows. His laugh echoed through the nearby area. HMPH, I'm not going to be billed for it or have to do paperwork about it like some heroes, so who cares? Wow, he is still strong even with those cuffs handicapping his power. No wonder, but still his father would be upset if he got hurt if All Might pushed a bit too far. Izuku felt his heart shrink 3 times the size as a wide grin stretched across his face. Oh, that's an idea. People fear Nezu, his father, and All Might is one of the heroes that has a severe fear of his father. He supposed that Papa at least fell somewhere between 2nd or 3rd place with Gran Torino, and All for One on that list with Sir Night Eye closely behind him. Playing the victim will definitely help in this case. He just has to somehow get hurt or be close enough to All Might for something to happen in his favor. Izuku immediately backed out of the alleyway into the other street to start exploring his options on what to do to take him down. He dived into a building to try and find something with a system, something to hack into since electricity or a connection should be set up somewhere for any emergencies. Izuku searched as he heard a more familiar exploding sound outside. He needed to find what he needed quickly so he could stop Bakugo from. His eyes locked onto wires taped to the upper trim of the wall that trailed to a room in the back of the store. Gotcha. How nice. All Might smacked his lips together as he hunted through the alleyways and streets. He bounced on the balls of his feet as he strides forward, launching himself into the air to survey the land at a higher point of vigilance. Now if I were 2 wannabe heroes, where would I be? All Might thought out loud, getting into his villain character. Ah, the theater. If only he didn't have to quit early because of the amount of training and care needed for him to perfect One for All. And even though they had made quite a few adaptations of his hero work as All Might, he was saddened that he never got to extend his acting career other than the voice acting he did for the cartoons. He only accepted the role of voice acting when he saw the smiles on those children's faces after seeing the animation teaser they put out. At least the voice acting was something despite his very limited lines that were mostly catchphrases. "I ain't no wannabe old man," young Bakugo yelled out, followed by explosions. He glanced to see the young blonde teen being propelled forward like a firework rocket towards him. Speaking of dramatics, All Might grabbed the blonde projectile flying at him with ease, throwing him away from him. He aimed the teenager at the grass patch for a softer landing compared to the fake building around him. Despite being a fake city, the materials they used were quite strong and used a lot of real material like concrete and metal. And the last thing he needed to do was get a hero student way more injured than they needed to be, especially because of Nezu's warning ringing through his head. "Remember, All Might, that this is an exercise. No physical harm will be done to the students, and if I found out you went too far with my son, you will regret it." He shivered as he watched young Bakugo shake off the landing, glaring at him from the ground as he readied another explosion launch. If young Bakugo was here, where was Izuku? Suddenly, the streetlights flicked on the fake city street, drawing his attention to them. That's when Bakugo decided to try to fight him once again. Shouldn't heroes stick together? Who knows when a villain could grind a hero into dust before backup can arrive? All Might laughed, gritting his teeth from the explosion searing into his side. He barely missed it, but it still burned through the side of his costume, leaving the irritated skin to ache in the shockingly cold air. Yep, that was a burn, but that didn't matter right now. All Might grabbed onto Bakugo's boot and swung him around like a weight ball at the gym. He ignored the twisted shouts from the teen as well as the pitched squeak when he finally threw him through the air. This was a good enough strategy for the 15-minute time. Well, 11 minutes now if the time was correct on the digital clock above the exit gate. Just then, All Might's ears perked up at the crackling sound of the speakers. He glanced to where the speakers lining the outer walls were. "Hello, villain." There's young Izuku." He was starting to wonder where he went. He couldn't find the boys, and he certainly didn't see him making a break for the entrance. Izuku's voice sounded warm despite the demeaning tone. "It seems like the villain doesn't know the trouble he is in. Do I have to remind you?" All Might smiled. Izuku was really taking this exercise seriously. At the sound of explosions, he turned to see Bakugo rocket off into the city, presumably to find Izuku. That was a weird plan. Why would young Bakugo try to lead the villain into the city where his hero partner is waiting? Are they working together at all? All Might let Bakugo disappear from his sights before starting to saunter his way back into town with the swagger of a confident villain, waiting to win their fight. He kept glancing back at the clock where he could, seeing the minutes dwindle down for the students. He searched, peeking his head into every alleyway as he rushed down the main street of the faux city. Faintly, he could hear a very villainous-sounding cackle echo down one of the alleyways in the fake parking garage area. Then it happened. A crackling sound over the speakers filled it with a static-filled laughter as any amount of artificial light in the town went off. It meant little to no difference since this exam was taking place in the daytime. But the further he walked in the city, the shadows in the alleyway seemed to grow bigger. All Might barely had time to react when a flying rocket of explosion aimed right at him. He grabbed onto Bakugo and tried to throw him off like the last time the boy had done this, except the blonde clung into him like a rapid koala onto his arm, biting at his hand. "I'm taking you down, shitty villain," Bakugo yelled out before digging his teeth into the soft spot between his thumb and pointer finger. "Ow!" Then he heard a whoosh of air from behind him, followed by a sharp click. All Might turned to find the other hero partner waiting for him, that gray top and erasure scarf that curled down their back to form a fake tail that swung back and forth like a cat that caught a mouse for dinner. Izuku smiled at him, floating in the air on his jetpack with Bakugo's grenade. He turned back to see Bakugo aiming his left grenade at him with a smirk despite the bloody cuts scattered across his arms. He had no time to react this time to the dual explosion attack. All Might quickly jerked Bakugo's gauntlet away from his injured side to aim the blast at the neighboring building. And once the building's side blew up with pieces of debris, he felt a simultaneous scathing heat blaze across the back of his torso. He whipped around Bakugo's body like a bat, making the surplus of explosion smoke rise up like a smokescreen, and the pieces of debris and dust from the building made the thin gray smoke get even darker. All Might heard a sputtering sound in the mess of smoke, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. He fell to the ground on his knee, cracking the asphalt road as he heard 2 thumps hit the ground. He reached up with a wince towards his back. Recovery Girl will not be happy about this. He has had enough injuries this week, and now he probably has his back burned off from this exam. Speaking of injuries, he would need to get Bakugo to Recovery Girl after the exam is over to treat the bloody cuts he saw, and possibly the forming bruises from all the harsh landings, although hopefully there was no broken. He heard a deep groaning sound, then a whimper accompanying it from closer. Oh shit. Wait, did he hit Izuku with young Bakugo? He whirled around with his student in his arms, so it was possible they collided with each other. Oh no, if that was the case, he would need to get them to Recovery Girl straight away. All Might abandoning his villain persona to carefully tread through the disappearing smoke, he walked straight into a street sign and knocked it aside with his hand. It went straight down and hit something that choked loudly before landing on the ground with a ping. All Might waved away the smoke around him to focus on the area when his feet crunched on something. He looked down to see pieces scattered on the ground, pieces of blue translucent screens and mechanical pieces. And that's when he saw a figure lying on the ground next to the sign, his jetpack in pieces and a puddle of something dark beneath his head. Hero? All Might asked, cautiously approaching the teen sprawled on the ground. Maybe he tripped back from the surprise of the sign being knocked over. He couldn't have hit him. Maybe his jetpack took most of the brunt. My head hurts, Izuku said with a frown, raising his head to show a line of red dripping down from his hairline. Hey, shit. Izuku looked up at him, pressing a hand to his head of green curls. The young teen winced, his fingers pulled away with sticky red blood staining the tips. Izuku looked up to him, not like a fallen hero, but like a hopeless victim. His lips started to tremble. It hurts, Uncle Toshi. Oh, shit. Never fear, the villain is here to reform their ways and get the hero Tosafiti. All Might rushed through the last bit of his sentence by grabbing onto his pseudo-nephew, ignoring the little helpless whine erupting from him that made his heart crumble in fear. He rushed past the wisps of smoke still making the area around him hazy. He needed to get Izuku through the gate, then straight to Recovery Girl, especially before Nezu sees his son in this state. It was a complete accident during the exam, but he surely won't see it that way at first. Got him it. All Might jumped through the air, trying to speed through the city while keeping a strong hold on Izuku. As he ran, he heard multiple announcements ringing through the air of Present Mic and Eraserhead losing their battles. He kept his head stable despite the small pained grumbles the other boy was letting out. He quickly whispered praises that would sound more like pleads to anyone else. Just endless words of "you're okay, please tell your dad it was an accident before he kills me or haunts every waking moment of my life." All Might could finally breathe when he got right outside the gate. The digital clock showed only a few minutes left of the exam. He looked down to see Izuku reaching out to him. "Uncle Toshi, is Kaken hurt?" "What? You have to go get Kaken." He waved his hand back to the city, his expression pulled into something unreadable as his eyes squinted from the pain. "He could have gotten hurt too. He might need Recovery Girl more than me." "Okay, just stay here, my boy," All Might whispered, laying him down on stable ground by the exit gate's door. He set him up against the wall until he was sure that Izuku wouldn't fall back, and then he pulled off the broken jet pack before Izuku could get hurt from the broken pieces. "I'll go grab him and get you both to Recovery Girl." All Might jumped back from him and rushed towards the city again to locate the blonde. The smoke should have cleared by now, which meant he would have an easier time locating him. As soon as he was in the middle of the city, he heard the announcement that another teacher had lost the battle, and that Midoriya Izuku has retreated. Wait, what? That means he probably retreated early and is probably flagging down for medical right now. He located Bakugo quickly to find the young teenager awake and responding enough to hit at his arms when he picked him up. "I'm not a damn toddler, let me go," Bakugo yelled, thumping his fists against his forearm as he bridle carried the boy back to the gate. All Might replied with a smile, "Your team has already won, hero. You don't have to keep fighting me." "Like hell I don't, I'm going to beat you into the ground," Bakugo screamed. The young teen promises to beat him in a one-on-one battle to prove he is stronger and become #1 hero on his own. He admires the young teen's passion for his future dream. When he walked up to the exit gate, All Might saw Izuku lean against the exit gate with his hand tightly gripping the strap of his broken jetpack. Bakugo spoke up when he saw Izuku leaning against the exit gate with a grin. "Dumbass. Are you feeling alright? Is your head okay?" Izuku wiped away the blood on his forehead with a grin. "Yeah, Uncle Toshi, I'm fine, no complaints." Wow, he looked completely fine compared to when he last saw him only a minute or two ago. Maybe it was just the shock of everything. He was just glad his young students were okay. Well, mostly okay. "Let's go see Recovery Girl," All Might said, placing Bakugo down when he got restless in his arms. Izuku reaches out to him, ignoring the threatening crackle of his palms to grab onto his elbow and support him. All Might walked ahead of them to call on Recovery Girl. Then he heard the sound of skin slapping strongly. Did they? He glanced back to see the two young teens waiting, Izuku with a teasing grin and Bakugo scowling back at him. Did they high-five? Why would they high-five? Were they celebrating over getting minimal injuries? No, why would they? They were probably celebrating their success in the exam despite their injuries. How nice. All Might, wow, these two are so close, celebrating their success. Izuku lording over his successful plan over Bakugo's stupid plan, forcing him into a high-five while Bakugo thinks about how to kill him. Not really. Kiashi shopping mall interview. "Oh, good," All Might stuttered in his response, throwing up a thumbs up to him. Then he sighed like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Thank goodness. All Might was more relieved than saddened when he told him about his plan that he concocted during the exam. It was a backup plan since the original plan with Bakugo went awry very quickly, but did lead him to success. And he was glad that most of the class made it out as well from their exams. Aoyama was gushing about Uraraka so much about her moves against 13 in their shared exam. And Jiru talked about how cool Koda was in their battle against Present Mike, which made the shy boy blush and wave away her compliments. Most of the class communicated on the group chat on how well they think they did and commenting on funny things that happened during their exam, like Shinso having to drag Siro out of their exam with Midnight since he immediately dropped. His friends made it out easy with their partners. Tenya had Ajiro, who he worked very well with and even planned a meet-up with him at a park to train together. And Shoto worked with Momo, who had a massive boost in self-confidence in her ideas, so now Shoto was invited to a future tea party. The only ones who weren't happy were Kaminari, Ashido, Kirishima, and Rikito since they failed their exams. The day after their exams, their expressions were crestfallen when Aizawa was announcing the field trip in their homeroom period. The sad looks melted away once his uncle said they would come along, but they had to take remedial classes during part of it. Near the end of homeroom, almost everyone in the classroom was already talking about what to do and what to plan out for the training summer camp. "You know what?" Ashido raised her voice to get everyone's attention. She had a wide grin stretched across her face. "I think we should all plan an outing at the mall. That way we can all get our supplies for it and hang out together." "That sounds awesome," Hagakure agreed easily, jumping up from her seat. A hair clip bounced in the air above her uniform. "What time should we do it?" "Hey, is everyone free this weekend?" Ashido called out, pointing out classmates who started to say or murmur their agreements. "Hell yeah," Kirishima yelled out to Ashido, who gladly returned his excitement with a hushed yes as she pumped up her fist. The red-haired teen turned to the spiky blonde near the front of the class. "Bakubro, are you coming?" Bakugo clinked his tongue. "I have every damn thing I need back at my house." Izuku hummed. He remembered seeing a picture of Bakugo near a mountain range when he visited his house that time. And his parents did say something about hiking, so it is very possible to make the assumption that the blonde had enough materials at his house. Either that or he just didn't want to hang out in a big group. He glanced at Tenya and Shoto, who caught his eye and gave him a nod to communicate over the loud conversation happening all around them. Uraraka was asking about what they would definitely need. Kaminari was questioning if he even needed to get batteries or pack chargers since he was electricity. Ajiro was saying something about bringing bug spray and more, which made Koda nod frantically at his words. Gyro kept talking about making a playlist for the road trip there, which all the girls jumped on to text them the link to. The conversation dwindled as most of the class started to quietly text through the group chat right before the bell rang. I'll start making a list and share it with you too so we can determine what items we need for the summer camp, Tenya said, pushing his glasses up as he passed under the doorway leading out into the hallway. He turned to them with a gaze of determination. I am sure we have some needed items already, but we could be in need of bug spray and other necessities. Can we get stuff for s'mores? Shoto asked. Tenya slowly turned to look at him. Shoto blinked. I feel like we need that. If we do, we need to either get enough for everyone in the class or hide it inside our luggage before anyone sees. Tenya lowered his voice like he was planning a crime by hiding snacks from the others in class. Although it is possible they are planning for that kind of night with the entire class in mind. Huh? Izuku hummed. He was sure he saw some ad from a candy company that was promoting something like s'mores for this season. I'm sure there is some candy that is similar to that. I saw something from the something sweet store that they have marshmallow and graham crackers covered in chocolate candies. Shoto whipped his head towards him. Are they small? Izuku blinked at the growing excitement and desire in his friend's eyes. I believe they are the size of half a number 2 pencil. They aren't small, but they aren't big either from what I can remember. Shoto immediately grabbed onto Tenya's sleeve, making their taller friend slow down their gait. We're getting those. Add it to the list, Tenya. All right, if we are adding snacks, I would like to add chocolate oranges to our list as well as classic trail mix, Tenya calmly replied, ignoring the intensity of Shoto's craving for s'mores inside his mismatched eyes. Izuku, what would you like to add, like in terms of candy or snacks? Izuku shrugged. He hasn't given much thought to snacks since he knew most of the food would be provided to accommodate the students. But the idea of secret stash for him and his friends at the end of the day intrigued him. I'll see when we get to the mall with everyone, but I'm leaning towards something salty. Maybe he could hide some of his chips in his bag. But wouldn't chips make too much noise? He'll have to think about it a little longer. The talk of the summer camp continued until lunch when Tenya started to write the list in full, sending the link to them while they ate, and the group chat pinging with the place, date, and time they could all meet up that weekend. The meetup spot was right in the center of the mall's first floor by the fountain. Kiashi Ward Shopping Mall was the perfect place given how many stories catered to different quirks, physiques, and needs. Izuku had arrived early with his friends with an improved tracking bracelet that Power Loader gave to him, and apparently Power Loader had something special commissioned by Nezu for the summer camp in case something happened. One by one, their classmates appeared earlier than the set time. Some were already paired up like they met along the way or if they traveled together since they live close by. At least that was the case for Kirishima and Ashido since their houses were in the same neighborhood. Shinso was 7 minutes late with a thermos of coffee in his hand, at least what he could assume from the strong smell. Then Aoyama showed him up by arriving last at a whopping 15 minutes past their set time. He noticeably put more effort into his look with the windswept hair and overall twinkling air around him. After Aoyama's arrival, it was clear that all 19 of them were there. Ashido cupped her hands around her mouth to call out over the class. All right, let's split up according to what we all need to get, and then we can all hang out for the mini golf place and the arcade. That sounds good, Izuku commented while Shoto nodded in agreement. It was a simple plan to execute. Can we plan out for lunch too? Kaminari questioned with a guilty grin, because I want to eat at the food court so bad right now. It's not even open yet. I think it opens in an hour or two, Shiro said. Kaminari bit down on his lip and shifted his feet. I didn't eat breakfast before I left. Me either, Rikido admitted from the back. I just had a few sugar packets in the way here to keep my energy up. All at once, the class started to talk over each other until Ashido couldn't make any suggestions or answer anyone anymore. The pink-haired girl turned to face Izuku's direction. Ash called out to someone just past his shoulder. Class Prez, can you help me out here? Ashido called out. You too, Vice Prez. Tenya walked over with Momo at his heels in a lovely skirt and blouse outfit. Together, they looked quite similar since Tenya had a somewhat classy look as well, with an outfit that made him look like he was heading out to play golf after this. "Attention!" Tenya yelled out, making everyone quiet down at his volume. "Let's plan this out before any of us get lost here," Momo called out to the big group with a smile. She turned on her heel to face Ashido. "What were you saying, Ashido?" Izuku could hear Ashido whisper, "You look so pretty, I love that peplum top on you." "Thank you, I like the design on your hoodie," Momo responded quietly. "Thank you so much, Momo." Ashido returned to her normal volume before anyone in the group talked again. "All right, I think the best way is to split up to get what we need, eat, chill a little, and then we can hang out until all of us need to go home." It took a few minutes for everyone to separate into smaller groups to tackle their needs for the summer camp. Shoto, Tenya, and Izuku were with Momo, who needed to hit a clothing store for more durable clothes for the training camp. When Shoto asked why, Momo replied gracefully, "Most of my clothes are more loose-fitting and flowing, so I want to get denim or something useful for outside, something like cargo pants." Momo took the lead and guided them to a general clothing store that was next to a diverse general item store that Ashido and Hagakure were walking into. It took only a few minutes to Momo looking through the denim options with a calculating look that Ashido and Hagakure were racing into the store as well. "Hey guys," Ashido greeted happily. She dug her hand into a small yellow paper bag around her arm to show off a pink camouflage lighter. She took the moment to lift her hand, put up a finger in the air to ask for silence, and then lit the lighter to show off a pink flame. "Check out these sick lighters. I like this one the most." Hagakure pulled out her own lighter that she purchased to showcase a specialty lighter that looked like a small playing card of the Queen of Hearts. She slid it open to show a blue flame, then clicked it back shut. "I don't think we need a lighter," Shoto whispered to both of them, gesturing to his fire side. Tenya met his gaze. "That's why it is not on our list." Momo explained why they were in this store, which made Ashido and Hagakure brighten up. Ashido pulled the two away for a quiet conversation behind a rack of discounted clothes. However, Izuku did not expect the little whispered conversation between the three girls to end up with him, Shoto, and Tenya getting dragged into an impromptu fashion show. It was all in good fun, so he didn't want to decline the chance to bond with his classmates. Tenya agreed to the fashion show, but Shoto elected to stay out of it and instead act as a judge with Hagakure. Momo ended up modeling cargo shorts with a matching vest made of the same material with 2 breast pockets, then showcasing a black and purple athletic type of shirt underneath that was sleeveless. Ashido dragged Tenya into the dressing room for him to try on a retro patterned shirt along with a weird beanie with a beard attached to it. And then it was his turn. Izuku tried on Ashido's pick, which was a purple cat hoodie with a black mouse ear hat. When he came out, Shoto gave a brief nod and said he looked along the lines of a mouse wearing a cat costume. It was a short-lived fashion show, but Momo had gotten what she needed the most out of it. When they walked outside, Izuku excuses himself from the bathroom. Tenya nodded while Momo got dragged ahead by Hagakure and Ashido. "We will head to the supply store, so meet us there when you're done." "Sounds like a plan," Izuku replied. So with that, Izuku separated from his group and raced his way to the bathrooms to take care of business. It did not take longer than a few minutes. Izuku walked out with freshly dried hands that faintly smelled of forest breeze when an arm wrapped around his shoulder familiarly. Izuku froze at the sudden contact, a weird tingle of discomfort traveling down his back. The person breathed out, their hit breath against his neck making him even more uncomfortable. Then with a scratchy voice they said, "I'm such a big fan." "Oh, that's lovely," Izuku commented, glancing back to see that their face was covered, but their voice was very familiar because of that raspiness to it. He has heard that before. "I am not worthy of such praise compared to the many heroes who rescue lives each day. I am just a student." "Well, I would just love an autograph," the scratchy voice responded. Wait, he knew that voice. It sounded too much like the villain that attacked his class. He glanced down to the hand gripping his shoulder to see 2 fingers were lifted so it wouldn't touch him directly. "Excuse me," Izuku cleared his throat even as his captor started to walk, basically dragging him towards the fountain. He started to resist the hold on him with a strained smile, still trying not to raise any suspicions. I am not comfortable with the ongoing physical contact. Everyone in this mall will not be comfortable in their last moments if you don't come with me right now. With those words like a silent promise, Izuku stopped resisting. He couldn't help but focus on the sounds of a family passing by with two laughing children. Izuku couldn't allow anyone to get hurt. Shigaraki smiled, turning to him so he could see the soft shadows of his face, those cracked lips around crooked teeth and those red eyes staring like a predator. It won't take a full minute for that snotty brat to be made into dust with a single touch. Shigaraki, I had a feeling you would come back. Izuku tilted his head to the surrounding area. Why the mall? Have you just been watching us like a stalker since the USJ, or? Not another word out of you unless there are answers to my questions. Izuku raised his eyebrows and raised his hands, staring Shigaraki dead in the eyes. He started to sign using JSL while the villain's eyebrows scrunched together in confusion at his moving hands and fingers. Shigaraki pulled him down to sit against the fountain edge, the crisp water sprinkling down behind them. What are you doing with your hands? I'm using Japanese sign language. Izuku stared up at him with confusion painted across his face to try and act dumb. And from that irritated face, it was working. You said not to use my words, so I can use my hands if you prefer. Smart as NPC, Shigaraki gripped onto his shoulder as they both sat knee to knee on the fountain. Now, tell me what is so different with how people reacted to Stain. He must not have heard that right, pardon. You heard me? No, he did hear that right, but what did he mean? Is he asking in comparison to his attack or to him in general, or is he that upset that Stain is getting sympathy since his tragic backstory got leaked? I did hear you. It's impossible not to know how close you are to me. Izuku could smell the soda and pizza whenever he spoke. I just don't understand what you are trying to ask. Do you want his autograph before he is taken away to Tartarus? No, tell me why Stain's ideology resonates so deeply with people. Why are my methods overlooked? Izuku paused, then turned to stare at him. I think one part is that your method was attacking a class of high school students while he took on adult heroes. Shigaraki groaned, his face going tense in a way that made Izuku want to back up from him. But he couldn't because he was being held hostage by not only the threat against his life, but also the threat against many lives passing by without noticing the villain nearby. I hate a lot of things, but what I truly despise above all else is Stain. He was never part of the League to begin with, yet the media is framing it to be that way. Shigaraki sneered. Everything that I had done up until now is being undermined by Stain's fame and that little video gaining sympathy. He is the one gaining recognition while the League is being pushed into the ground by that growing fan base of Stain. Shigaraki turned to him. I remember you being so talkative at the USJ, so I figured you could help me like a good little hero. What is the difference between Stain and I? What makes this response so different? I can list several off the top of my head. Izuku answered immediately, which threw off Shigaraki slightly from the shocked expression that crossed his face briefly. Izuku cleared his throat before he began. Number one is you and your poorly formed League. When he looked at Shigaraki's face, Izuku explained further. I say poorly formed because there was no real rhyme or reason to them. They were all low-level thugs that it seemed you randomly hired a day before to go attack because you thought quantity over quality. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Izuku waved his hands in the air like he was weighing the two options on a scale. Anyway, the League attacked a high school class just assuming that All Might would be there. You had no problem attacking children. Right off the bat, the media is not giving real recognition or fame to villains who attack innocents. They won't give sympathy or look into your ideals when that was your first outing. I can already guess you will make some comment about Stain killing several heroes and maiming others. The only difference to draw between you is the victims of attacks. Stain has not killed or harmed any students, teens, or children. Izuku raised a finger up in the air before the villain could interrupt him. But he did attack several adult pro heroes regardless of his vague ideal of fake versus true heroes. I'll get to that in my next point. Next is the whole ideals being known to the public. As far as I know, the only thing I can read from you is that you act more like a puppet leader than an actual real leader of a villain's league. I talked about it with you in the USJ if you can remember. A lot of it was bluffing. He knew through certain points that he can safely assume some things based on the way Shigaraki acted. But a few of the more detailed points were things he was bluffing to get a telling reaction out of him. Izuku wonders just how much of it he got right because of the hand tightening to the point of bruising his shoulder. Secondly, it seems like the only part of your ideal is getting rid of All Might in some way to throw society off. That's the most of what I got out of you. Now I don't really accept Stain's actions, especially since I think it is quite hypocritical considering most if not all of his victims were good heroes. He was very strict with his view of All Might being the only true hero in a world of fakes. Izuku explained to Shigaraki, who was leaning on every word he said. He hummed as he thought about the similarities the two ran through his uncle. I would say how you view All Might compared to how Stain does is one notable difference. You were both somewhat inspired by All Might and started your journeys because of him in a way. So All Might is the main problem and difference, Shigaraki said like it was the only thing he wanted or needed to head. No, he's not. Izuku raised his voice to get that dumb happy look off that villain's face. Shigaraki looked dumbfounded when Izuku felt an irritation climb up his chest at his annoying behavior. God, it's like you only listen to what you want to hear instead of any other part of my explanation. You asked me to explain, yet you aren't listening. The reason why the whole of society is so full of prejudice and discrimination is from the many years even before quirks appeared. Prejudice and discrimination against other people, whether their race, gender, or orientation, has been prevalent since before the baby with the light quirks appeared more than 200 years ago. Izuku ranted, pointing a finger into Shigaraki's chest like he didn't have the power to kill him in an instant. You would know if you cracked open a history book. If you want to simplify it, the reason why everything is so bad towards certain groups of people is because of louder, close-minded people. There are more people who will stand by and rely on someone else to do things instead of taking actions. There are people who discriminate because they feel no one will call them out on it. Izuku continued with example after example. People feel free to treat others however they feel like when they are in a higher position. Heroes who will wait on different ones that are stronger instead of moving to take care of it themselves. The bystander effect as a whole affects a lot of people in the world. After the fifth one, Shigaraki had somehow let go of his shoulder and instead was listening with a fierce kind of intensity. You say All Might is the main problem without realizing they are heroes who do way worse than him, and heroes that do better than him with less recognition for their work. Izuku continued despite Shigaraki looking like he already checked out of this conversation. He breathed in, wishing he had a water bottle with him to take care of his dry throat. Is the fountain water drinkable? Wait, no, it had dirty coins in there which might throw off the taste of it. Society is a problem, I can't deny that. But the only thing I can hope to do is change it slowly but surely. Shigaraki paused, then scoffed. You won't do anything until you become a pro-hero. That's what you think, but I have already started. Izuku leaned forward to look behind Shigaraki's full face. He hurriedly stood up since Shigaraki had already shrugged off his hold on him. He lowered his voice and replied, Meanwhile, you are acting like an ignorant NPC with no real direction on how he wants the world to go, and how he wants his life to go. Izuku hurriedly turned to see Tenya and Shoto staring at him. The three girls behind them watched carefully and curiously at the interaction. What are you doing? Quick, he can't let them get too scared. Izuku forced a quick smile on his face. Hey, guys, do you know where the body care products store is? This guy was looking for directions. Oh, it's past the jewelry store at the corner, Hagakure called out as Shigaraki stood up. I think they have a sale going on. I'll take my leave then, and I'll think about what you said, Midoriya Izuku. With that, Shigaraki turned on his heel and walked into the passing crowd. His figure disappeared into the crowd of people. Izuku kept watching, looking for where the villain had gone when Shoto's cold hand landed on the small of his back. Shoto looked concerned when he jumped back at the touch. Tenya walked forward with knitted eyebrows. Izuku, are you okay? Tenya, call my dad and inform him that Shigaraki infiltrated the mall and held me hostage for a minute or two to interview me. What? Excuse me? Tenya's voice cracked at his shock from his answer. The three girls came closer with worried looks at the mention of the villain. Shoto came closer as Tenya's hands grabbed onto his own. Explain. I'll explain while we buy our snacks. Izuku tried to lighten the mood despite the growing feeling in his chest that was making it hard to breathe. Shigaraki was gone. Why was he panicking now? Hagakure, can you tell the group chat about the situation and to wrap up what they need to buy before the heroes get here? On it, Hagakure's phone floated out of her pocket and multiple dings rang out through the air as she typed into the chat. Do you anything? Shoto asked as Momo and Ashido edged forward. Are you alright? Momo asked with a frown. I'm okay, Izuku tried to be reassuring, but the look on everyone's face was doubtful. I'm just a little on edge because a whole villain interaction happened. People's lives were at stake. They were all counting on him. What happens if Shigaraki comes back at that second to just kill one of his classmates like he wanted to do at the USJ? He could be waiting in the wings right now, just waiting for him to feel safe again. Maybe he would just go on a killing spree in the crowd despite his deal to not to do anything if they talked. Shigaraki. A soft feeling of a blanket wrapped around his shoulders with a crinkling sound. Then the weight of the blanket around his shoulders made him slump forward a bit only to relax at the comfort. Izuku focused on Momo fixing her peplum top at the back. He looked down to see a weighted blanket wrapped around him with Shoto right next to him. His eyes landed on Momo's kind dark ones. Thank you. Despite Tenya trying to tell him that they could wait, Izuku made his way to the snack store with the weighted blanket around his body like a cocoon. It barely took him 2 minutes before settling on a big bag of potato sticks, shrimp chips, and chocolate biscuits shouted like tiny mushrooms. No one was really happy about the fact that the mall was closed and that Shigaraki was so close yet again to hurting them. Once the group chat all got the messages, most, if not all, were rushing to make sure that Izuku wasn't hurt or if anyone else was hurt. Kaminari did make a comment about being hungry, which then became tears when Izuku pulled open his bag of potato sticks to give him some. All 19 of them were standing outside the mall under the cover of a tree, while most of the other civilians were navigating their way out with their cars or calling for someone to pick them up. Police cars were parked in the green with several officers making their way inside to either guide people or find any clue of where Shigaraki might have went. Everyone had called their parents or guardians to tell them of the incident. The first one to arrive was someone Izuku entirely expected. Who else would arrive so quickly since he was wearing a tracking bracelet? Papa, Izuku called out once he saw that familiar small car. He felt his classmates' eyes on him when the driver's window rolled down to reveal 2 white ears poking out of a straw hat. Kaminari yelped and hid behind Ashido, who held out her newly bought lighter like it was a single torch protecting her from a monster in a horror game. Hello, Nezu cheerfully called out, waving his paw in their direction. Ah, Tenya and Shoto, you can come with me. I informed your parents already of the arrangement. The 3 were already walking towards the car when Nezu said hello. Izuku bit back a smile when he turned to wave back at his classmates who were staring at Nezu and the car. Izuku climbed in the car with his 2 friends in the backseat when his father yelled out the window. Eraserhead is 2 minutes away, so you can have someone trustworthy watch over you for the time being. Goodbye, my son's classmates. The last view he had of his classmates were of them waving goodbye to him as his father drove away. Papa. Yes. I need something made for the summer training camp. Hello, Hawks Keigo. Hawks knew it wouldn't be easy to find Nezu's son, aka the likely suspect for the expert hacking done to the Hero Commission. If anyone was raised by Nezu, they would be a significant suspect on the list for the hacking, since Nezu liked to hack government systems before he became the owner and principal of Yuyui, also known as UA. His first lead took him to the necessary papers and comments which should be made for public access. If he adopted someone or had a son in general, there should be documents with Nezu's claim of guardianship over them. But no matter where he looked, he couldn't find any information. He tried to access the public database through a library computer in a private room in the back. He did find a file with Nezu's name on it, but as soon as he clicked it, a virus popped up in the computer. Hawks freaked out as the computer fried itself out through whatever coding the mastermind had put into place. He knew that Nezu would probably be hiding his child, but why did he have to put a whole virus on a public document? He asked the Hero Commission, but it turns out they had already tried that in several ways. His boss scowled when he told them of the way he burned through a library computer. She sighed, putting a hand up to her pinned back graying hair. Every computer we tried on had the same effect. We even hired another hacker to counteract the virus, but we couldn't make any significant difference to it. Even the Hero Commission couldn't get that far past Nezu's wall of digital acid and fire. He tried to work with the nickname of Mouse given to the kid from what he could hear from others' conversations. He tried to search through children with rodent or mouse types quirks in the database, but that led to a blank too. He even looked at the foreign databases with larger amounts of quirks but could find no kid that could match perfectly. Most had parents or guardians, others were already well into their adulthood, and a lot of them were way too far away to consider, especially with no record of them visiting Japan at any time of their life. Maybe the mouse name was just a nickname after all, like he originally thought. Hawks frowned as he dug through the discount fried chicken bucket he bought. His hotel-perfect apartment felt too empty and cold as he tried to rack his brain for answers. How long has it been since he started on this strain of information again? It felt like a month. Was it a month? No, he still had that modeling job for that new red eyeliner and wing stamp a few days away, so a full month shouldn't have passed by. He had already looked through the classes of UA, but no face jumped out at him. If he has Nezu, his kid wouldn't be in the spotlight, so the chance of him being in the hero class was slim, unless that is what he expects others to think. Great, now he is back at the start with reviewing the first and second year students. It would take a few days on and off patrol to handle looking into all of them on the roster, because the roster for the hero schools were made public, excluding some information for privacy purposes because of their future careers. So that means he will be bouncing back and forth between the quirk registration database and the available school roster. Well, looks like he needs to reschedule his days and inform the commission about the time he needed. Things would be so much better if he didn't have to worry about stuff like this, but hey, duty calls. It took so much time over several days to pick apart each student with the files he was able to cover. The first day was business class, the second day was for the general education course, and then the support course for the third day. And now he was going through the files of the hero class just in case. He separated the files that drew the most suspicion, like ones that matched the kind of things he heard about Nezu's son. If he was tutored by him, he was intelligent, especially if he was responsible for the hacking. That means all of the support course classes were under a high suspicion until they were proven innocent by their files. There were many things he overheard about Nezu's son, like how unnameable his hair seemed to be and how helpful he was. Apparently, one sidekick spotted how this mysterious son got on All Might's case about taking his vitamins. Most of the hero course checked out with both parents present. Roster. Name Midoriya Izuku. Age 15. Quirk nut. Database. Name Midoriya Izuku. Age 15. Blood type. Parents. Midoriya Inko status deceased quirk attract. Midoriya Hisashi status alive quirk fire breathing. Quirk nut. Huh, that's Greeny. Hey, he made it into the hero course quirkless. Nice little dude. It wasn't long until he made it though all the hero courses with no one really jumping out at him and saying they were fitting the description he needed. Well, maybe Midoriya, since he had to be thinking out of the box and smart to get into the hero course with the exam he knew that UA had. It looks like he needs to visit the school yet again. That means he needs to ask for a case that will draw Nezu's attention from the commission to get his audience. Hawks knew he couldn't look suspicious, especially since he was digging into Nezu's life. He and all of Hero Society knew to tread carefully with all things concerning Nezu. It will only be a miracle if Nezu hasn't realized yet. Hawks pulled in his red wings as he landed on the campus, clutching a case file in his hand with a tight grip to make sure not a single paper flew out when he was flying over. Mamma mia, here we go again. He took his time walking through the halls and occasionally nodding at and taking pictures with the students that approached him in the hallways. When he finally got to the principal's office and explained what he needed help with, Principal Nezu declined. Nezu looked remorseful for a second with his eyes glued onto the file in his hands. Then his gaze turned away to the paperwork forms spilled out over his desk with several things highlighted in neon pink and green. Oh, Hawks, I would love to dig deep into that case, but I have my paws full at the moment with the recent situation at the mall invoking my students. That drew his attention. He did hear about a villain attack at the mall, but he didn't have any information that UA was involved in some way. The media would have been all over it if that was made public. Oh, were UA students part of another League of Villains attack? It was more of a hostage situation at the Kiashi Ward shopping mall compared to the attack on the USJ, Principal Nezu sighed. A student was held hostage, but thankfully there were no injuries or casualties of any kind. Is the student okay? Hawks asked, straightening up at the mention of a hero student getting involved in this not even a month after the attack. I would like to think they will be all right. Hound Dog has a few meetings with them to make sure they are of safe and sound mind. Nezu trailed his eyes to the case file in his hand before turning his attention back to his computer. His beady gaze focused on the blue screen in front of him, typing like one of those hackers in the movies he binged in his apartment when he had the free time. If you can wait in half an hour at least, I will be happy to delve into that case with you, Hawks. Alright, do you mind if I fly around? Maybe he can walk around and see if there are any students just overall acting suspicious. There is no issue with you having a tour around my school. I'm very proud of it and how it stands. Nezu's ears twitched up in amusement. However, do try not to break anything. That's what the students are here for. Hawks laughed good-naturedly at the little joke the principal made. He saluted the chimera with 2 fingers and his trademark smirk. Got it, Nezu. He allowed his face to relax back into something neutral as he walked through the halls. He scanned his eyes over teachers, staff, and students alike as he walked through the school. Apart from the greetings and requests for pictures or a quick autograph, he found nothing that stood out to him. It was just a school filled with students without a single one reminding him of the chimera upstairs. Sure, there was some maniacal laughter from the support course hallway, but that leaned more towards mad scientists and not sadistic principals. Hawks walked with a few of his feathers floating a bit away from him to try and catch some conversations and help a few students whose items fell from their hands or students who were in danger of falling flat on their face. A whispered conversation about packing caught his attention when he noticed one of those faces looked exactly like the ones in the hero course he went through. What was their name? They belonged to the Yaoyorozu family. The 2 girls passed by him with excited looks on their faces. Yaoyorozu said, I have the necessary clothes for the outdoors. Have you ever been to a summer camp like this before? No, but I have gone camping with my parents before. The purple-haired girl answered with a smile. His red feather circled around the area above them to feel the vibrations of their words. My dad played the guitar by the fire to get inspired. It was really cool, especially when my mom joined in. I'm sure this experience will be different since, we will be training during it. The purple-haired girl's voice got lower as they walked away from him. He pulled his feathers back with a frown. The hero course students were going to a training summer camp soon. Interesting. Hawks felt a vibration from his watch communicator around his wrist. He frowned as he pulled down the sleeve of his coat. Did the hero commission need him for something urgent even though they told him to focus on the case of Nezu's son? The screen on his smart tech watch flickered before lines of green and white appeared with bright green text. Hello KIGO. Letter 161B, letter 1550, letter 1437. Hawks froze when he saw the screen, whipping his head up to see a crowd of students inside the cafeteria barely paying any attention to him. His feathers quivered in the air surrounding him as his breaths quickened inside his chest. The hacker knew his name. Of course they did, they hacked his file. His eyes searched the area with the different colors of hair that blended into one mix of colors much like eyeshadows he had modeled before. Hello, Hawks. Hawks didn't pay attention to the voice greeting him and only focused on the screen on his wrist. His other arm reached out towards the person who greeted him that was close to him. Oh, that's a tight grip you seem. The voice trailed off as they tried to dislodge the grip. Hawks tried to pull back from the grasp he had on the person, but his mind was still fuzzy as his eyes focused on that crudely drawn mouse. They sounded like Greenie. Their voice lowered, tugging on his hand as they started to guide him away from the area. Follow me, Hawks. Hawks followed while he turned away from the threatening greeting displayed on his wrist. He turned to see the familiar curls of green that he knew was Greenie, the small teen guiding him through like a man on a mission. Hawks calmed his breathing down as the kid dragged him along past the hallways and towards a bland stairwell. Underneath the stairwell was a door that the kid opened and guided him inside. Hawks blinked when the bright lights turned on, revealing a small bathroom with 2 stalls and 2 sinks available. In the shining light was Greenie, Midoriya Izuku, staring back at him. Hawks cleared his throat. What's with the relocation? It's a safe place. This place doesn't have any cameras for privacy reasons, and no one comes in here because people forget this bathroom is even here. Greenie explained, waving his hand in the air casually. It's no one's fault really. This place is tucked way too close to the stairs that everyone mistakes it for a cleaning closet. Hawks could still feel his heart beating within his chest even though he was using the techniques taught to him. Greenie looked away towards the giant mirror along the tiled wall, although there have been a lot of third years caught here doing some stuff. What stuff? Hawks asked, his interest piqued into what kind of high school gossip he could get in on since he didn't have this kind of experience. It's stuff like haircuts and piercings, Midoriya Izuku said with a shrug. Although I think some support course students come in here to make deals with the hero course students to discuss future partnerships. He leaned in to whisper, but you didn't hear it from me. Got it, Hawks whispered back, pulling away right as his grip loosened on Midoriya's wrist. Hawks, are you all right? Midoriya asked, his eyebrows pinching together in concern. Yeah, sorry kid, about the grip I had on you. Hawks apologizes, which the teen waved off like it was no worry that he now had red crescents decorating his wrist like a messed-up bracelet. He bit down on his lip as he answered the commission prepared for him in this type of situation. It is a reflex I have. It's okay, I'm learning to take care of any situation, Midoriya said. I figured it would be best when I was a hero to take care of as many situations as I could, even if it was something not related to a villain. That goal is pretty admirable. I guessed you were stressed about something and guided you here to calm you down. Midoriya looked away with guilt written across his face, although it might have been better to bring you somewhere outside or a place you know more about instead of this bathroom you've never been before. It's okay, Hawks waved off the worry. The kid did a good job in the situation. He was pretty sure the teen was talking him through the walk towards the private bathroom even though he couldn't really hear him. But yes, it would be better with more familiar places that are away from eyesight. This place is good enough since I don't really know the building all that well in the first place to recognize many places. But keep certain situations in mind for this kind of stuff since you never know how people will react. I'll take what you said in mind. Midoriya pulled out a notebook out of nowhere as soon as he said that. His hands were flying to write down what Hawks had said. You write down notes for yourself? Hawks questioned, eyeing the cheap stationery notebook. Yeah, Midoriya answered quietly, focusing on writing down what he said in a bullet point list if the way he scribbled a circle was any indication. I write down anything necessary and crucial to learn for my future. My notes help me a lot. Good to hear. Hawks leaned back against the cold tile wall, his feathers shivering at the feel. Well, I have some time to kill, so what's going on with you, Greenie? Me? Well, apart from the mall situation, God, how many of the students were at the mall when it happened? Wait, did you hear about that? I heard a few things about it, Hawks admitted, shifting in his feet as he adjusted his pants higher on his hips. The principal said one of your classmates got involved in a hostage situation. Are they all right? Yeah, I'm good. What? Greenie was the one captured. What the hell did Greenie do? Oh, sorry, I'm the one who was involved in the situation. But don't worry, Hawks, I'm doing okay. I have more therapy sessions scheduled to take care of it. Hawks leaned further against the wall and stuck his hands in his pockets to act casual as he could. Then he asked, you have that summer camp coming up, right? Oh, Midoriya looked caught off guard. How did you hear about it? I heard two of your classmates talking about it when I passed by, Hawks said, noticing the shift in weight in Midoriya's stance. Something about how they still needed to figure out what to pack for it. Yeah, Midoriya said slowly, his posture still tense. Summer camp is starting soon for us. How do you feel? Hawks stared at him as the hero course student hesitated before answering him. Well, I feel a bit complicated about it. I'm excited since it sounds fun, but I'm nervous too, which is normal given the circumstances. Poor kid. Hey. God, he might regret this, but it could help in the future to have someone at UA willing to see if there was any suspicious students coming in and out of the principal's office. Hawks pulled away a feather from his wings, a small red one that was all fluffy from the very tip of his right wing. He flew the feather right into Midoriya's chest, who clasped it with both of his hands gently. Here, take this with you. Midoriya looked up at him in surprise. I don't trust that the villains will leave you and your class alone, especially with the recent situations in Hasu and at the mall. Break the feather if you need backup. Set it on fire, whatever you need to do. Midoriya looked at the red feather to him. Okay. Promise me, kid. I promise. Hawks nodded at the other's agreement. If anything goes wrong, he should be able to feel something is up with his feather when it gets destroyed. Then he can go in and bring other heroes with him. Hawks, please report back to my office. Nezu's voice echoed over the intercom. Oh, it looks like my principal needs to talk with you, Midoriya said. Hawks smiled at the teen. Yeah, hopefully we will see each other again in better circumstances. On the way to training camp. Hey listeners and headshakers, it is I, DJ Mouse, Izuku greeted inside his seat at the studio. He lowered the music playing in the background so his voice came out crisp over his headphones. And this is a little catch-up in what happened today. First off, we have a song that's topping the charts online. Like a Ghost by Nagaraboshi went viral because of the band's debut music video on HeroTube. Izuku said, his hand hovering over the newly released song as he pulled it right underneath his music bed. Second, Pro Hero Wash at his first anniversary of his charity called Clean Clothes for Kids. Finally, a former sidekick of the equipped hero, Yorumusha, rose up the ranks as a pro hero recently. Let's all keep an eye out for Kagami as she rises on her own. Now let's get back to the music. Izuku let the intro of the new song start playing as he started lowering his music bed's volume. This is Like a Ghost by Nagaraboshi. I'm DJ Mouse and this is Put Your Hands Up. Right as he finished, the lyrics of the new song kicked in, filling the studio with a slow rock melody. He breathed out, relaxing back into the cushioned seat as his uncle walked back in the room, his long blonde hair swaying while he approached him with a smile. Hey DJ Mouse, the show is going great from what I can hear. I did hear a stumble around the top of the hour. Izuku turned his gaze at the multicolored screen of buttons and lines of songs with a time set along the left side of the screen. Sorry, Uncle Mike, there was a little mishap with the microphone. It's no big deal, his uncle waved off his apology. A big deal is cursing or talking about something wayyyy too controversial. Present Mike raises his voice to emphasize the other half of his sentence. His green eyes had a mischievous light as he leaned forward on the desk with the computer set up. Are you feeling excited about the training camp? A little, Izuku smiled then shrugged. I don't know, it's more of a mixture between excited and nervous. The whole mall incident makes me feel weird. Hey, I'm sure nothing is going to happen. You have the Wild Pussycats, Eraserhead and Vlad King to back you up, Present Mike said. He walked around the desk of computers and ignored the music playing in the background. He laid a hand on Izuku's shoulder and brought him into a close one-armed hug. And if you're still worried, I'm sure your dad has another plan up his sleeve. Izuku touched his watch as an unfamiliar feeling tickled the back of his throat. I know. So, Present Mike drew out the O. He smiled, the mischief returning back to his eyes. I heard some of your classmates got permission to go to the pool, a pool that not many first-year students would know about. You wouldn't happen to know about that, would you? I don't have to say anything without a lawyer, Izuku smiled, glanced up at his uncle who started to laugh at his response. The pool idea that he told Kaminari and Shiro about was totally worth it, especially when Uncle Aizawa came in to take them away after their scheduled time was up. Izuku was still smiling as he walked into his home. His damp hair still had a few droplets of water dripping from the strands. He can still hear Bakugo's explosions ringing through his ear with Shinso's sarcastic replies somewhat mixed inside his head. It all ended with Shoto almost making the pool water into a slush until Uncle Aizawa stopped the pool party. He shut and locked the door behind him as his dad called out to him. I see that your tracking device is waterproof. The signal has not been interrupted once. That's good to hear, Izuku replied, skipping over to his father sitting with his legs under the kotatsu. A book was resting on top of the table with a bookmarked place 3/4 in and a steaming coffee cup with a tea bag steeping inside. Is it comfortable? Nezu asked, his eyes glued on him in concern reflected off his black eyes. Do you need any adjustments made before the summer camp starts? I can admit that it took a little shifting to get it comfortable, but it feels like a second skin instead of a tracker. Izuku scratched at the back of his neck and pulled down his damp hair from the limp grip of his hair tie. The watch on his wrist was still perfectly functional as it beeped as it reached the hour, and as long as the League doesn't suspect anything further, they won't go reaching for it. Excellent news, Nezu smiled. Then his father leaned forward with his arms propped up on the table. Are you certain you are ready for this? I made my checklist and half of my suitcase is already packed with clean clothes. Izuku knelt down to place his legs underneath for the heat coming out from under the table. He held up his hand to count off some supplies he already packed with his clothes. I have my snacks, a flashlight, and a microfiber cloth and spray for Ida in case he forgot his glasses cleaning supplies. That's good to hear, Nezu said, his lips curled up in a heartfelt grin. It sounds like you are prepared, and Power Loader's tech does seem to be working well, but make sure you remember how to react if you get any suspicion that things might go awry. Yes, Papa, Izuku answered, gesturing towards the watch around his wrist. If I feel like anything's wrong, I will press on the panic button on my watch, and that means that you and a team of heroes will be notified and come in to help. Good, I already selected a secondary forest if anything amiss is found in the first location with the wild pussycats. Nezu picked up his mug to take a sip from the hot tea. Ah, pomegranate black tea, you should try it tonight. His father cleared his throat, placing his cup down on the table before continuing to explain. As far as I can tell, the team has not found any evidence that the League or anyone outside would know of the forest. It should mean that you and your class will be safe during this summer camp, but it is not bad to make sure that everything runs well. Nezu smiled knowingly, leaning his head into his paw. It's the life of a principal to worry about all his students after all. I'll make sure to keep my eyes and ears open when I'm away, Izuku promised. Make sure you do, Nezu replied. His father gently placed his paw on his hand. I would burn down the underground myself if you get hurt when I'm not there to protect you. Lush trees and vibrant bushes flew by outside the bus window as Izuku adjusted the watch on his wrist. He looked up to his bag above him right at the front pocket where Hawk's feather was tucked away safely. Even though he had been reassured that there was a backup plan upon backup plan, he still packed non-lethal weapons and Hatsume's bobbies for the camp. It never hurts to be prepared. Izuku also brought one of his herb and flower guides since he would be in a forest and he wanted to see if he could sneak a few home. Ida was seated next to him with Shoto sitting in the seat in front of them because he lost the rock, paper, scissors game. Shoto's seatmate was Momo, who was a lovely person to talk with since Izuku shared an interest in imported teas just like her. How some teas worked well with mooncakes, cookies, or toasted scones. Shoto had dozed off after the bus had reached the more rural roads, and Momo had fallen rather silent when Jiru started sharing her playlist with her. I wonder what the summer training will be like, Ida said, his eyes lingering on the foliage the bus was passing. Do you think I'll have time to do my early morning jogs? I think they'll be training us hard, so I don't think you have to worry about that, Izuku replied. He looked up at his friend, but his eyes spotted the slight smudges on the glasses from the mild sunlight shining in through the bus window. Izuku extended his hand, palm up to his friend, who blinked down at his palm in confusion. Give me your glasses, I can see the smudges. Oh, I didn't notice them. Ida took off his glasses, squinting at the smudges with the provided light from inside the bus and the natural light from the window. I believe I have my cleaning spray in my bag. No need, Izuku said, pulling out one cleaning cloth from his friend's glasses lens. He tucked one into his pockets just in case something like this happened on the way. There you go, Ten-chan. Thank you, Tenya responded with a smile. Izuku looked away from Ida's grin to see what his other classmates were doing to pass the time on the bus trip to the training camp. Uraraka and Ajiro further down the aisle talking with each other fervently. Kaminari had visible sparks around his head with 3 phone cords sticking out of his mouth. Kirishima was loudly discussing hiking trails with Bakugo. Koda was watching out the window near the back, waving to the outside world to the sky like he was greeting the birds flying by. Takami has headphones on with a notebook clutched within his hands and a stylized pen with a metal feather on the top. Shoji was spread out on his own bench, sleeping away with Sato close by, snoring even louder than he was. The rest of the bus ride was filled with him and Tenya talking about what they expected and guessing on what kind of things would be there. I want to see if there are any poisonous flora like berries or leaves that I can bring back home. Izuku did research on this region of Japan to see if he could find some interesting things around where they will be training. I think Papa will get a kick out of them. Ida looked concerned. His hand chopped through the air and landed on his shoulder. Be careful if you do. Did you bring gloves to safely retrieve them? I have gloves and empty bottles to hold them in. I'll be fine, Izuku replied. The rest of the bus trip was spent with him and Tenya trading questions with each other of what the camp would entail. Would they sneak out for a s'mores night with just the 3 of them? Will they be training at night or just during the day? Those kinds of questions were deliberated over and answered until the bus had reached a spot on the mountain road. 2 of Wild Pussycats were standing there waiting for them as Class 1B's bus passed by them. The other team members might be at the camp waiting for them. Izuku could only guess that the camp had started already since the bus stopped out of nowhere on the side of the mountain road. Ida got everyone's attention before their bus could even park as Eraserhead rose up from his seat. All right, everyone, get out. Eraserhead announced, standing at the front of the bus with a bored expression. Izuku watched his uncle rub the sleep out of their eyes as the rest of his classmates started getting out of their seats. Once they all got out, Mandalay and Pixie Bob were ready to start their official introduction. Mandalay winked as she purred out her introduction. "Your feline fantasies are here, meow," she pawed at the air with the cat paw gloves. "Perfectly cute and cat-like girls," Pixie Bob said, posing cutely as the cat ears on her head moved up a notch. "You can call us the two women posed in front of the entire class in their pro-hero cat-themed costumes, the Wild Pussycats. Izuku glanced over to see that most of his class was stunned at the introduction, with a lot of them looking confused. "These are the pro-heroes you will be working with during the training camp," Eraserhead said, gesturing with his hand towards the two members of the team. "Who?" Shinso whispered out with hesitance and confusion. Izuku turned his head over his shoulder with a smile. "The Wild Pussycats is a 4-person team that specializes primarily in mountain rescues." "Everyone, say hello," Eraserhead said, making most of his classmates stand straighter at the authoritative tone of his voice. "Don't be unnecessarily rude to the ones looking after you." The class immediately started to say their greetings, some waving and some saying how nice it was to meet them. Iida bowed and loudly said his hello while Izuku waved at them with a smile. "Hi everyone," Mandalay waved at the class. She sent over a bright smile along with Pixie Bob at him, and "Nice to see you again." It's been a while since he saw them. It's nice to know that they are in the Wild Pussycats' hands. They are very capable in their work with mountain rescue, so they would know a lot about the terrain. Didn't they own their own land? "We own this whole stretch of land. Everything you can see is ours," Mandalay related to the class, who was staring out into the miles of rich green. Izuku could hear Kaminari talk under his breath somewhere behind him. "Everything the light touches in this kingdom is yours." Pixie Bob waved her gloves hands in a cheerful manner. "And the summer camp you'll be staying at for your training is at the base of the mountain." "That's pretty far down," Kirishima stated, awkwardly chuckling as he tried to spot where the camp could be with all of the trees and leaves covering the land. Zero glanced from where the camp was and then back to the bus. "Yeah, it will take a while for the bus to drive down there." "But why did we stop all the way up here instead of driving down with the bus?" Mina asked, her voice trailing off. Izuku could see the realization dawn on everyone's faces as they started to see where this situation could be going. "We're going to have to fight our way down there, aren't we?" Shoto said, walking up beside him with a bold yawn. "It appears so," Tenya said, not missing a beat while most of the others started to panic. "I have a bad feeling," Sato called out nervously. "Hey, why don't we get back on the bus before they—" Mandalay hummed, drawing attention to her as the mechanical tail attached to her skirt's belt waved in the air. She tilted her head like the perfect picture of innocent curiosity. "Bus? What bus?" Everyone in his class paled as the bus doors closed with a loud shut. Aoyama helped, which made everyone turn around to see Pixie Bob waiting outside the bus with a smirk. "It's already 9:30 a.m., you're losing daylight," Mandalay trailed off. Izuku stifled a laugh at his classmates' reactions while his friends started to look less excited than they were before. "If you're fast enough, you can get down to the camp by noon. Kiddies who don't make it by 12:30 will miss the lunch hour, so you might want to start running now." Uncle Eraser cleared his throat as Pixie Bob's gloves started to emit a blue light. "You should have guessed when we stopped, but the training camp." As soon as he saw Pixie Bob kneel down, Izuku grabbed onto his friend's arms with practiced ease, mostly because both of their arms were already extended. "It has already begun." That was the only amount of warning the class got before being pushed off the mountain road's ridge onto the slope below, a massive cloud of dirt pushing them into a race to the camp. Pixie Bob shouted out to them, "Go, go, go, we'll meet you at the camp." Izuku held on tight to his friends as they fell towards the trees. Smooth landing was out of the question as the graininess of the dirt and the unmoving branches created an uncomfortable landing. However, there was a bright side as Izuku surveyed the area. At least the three of them didn't end up hanging from the trees with Zero's tape like Kaminari, Zero, and Shinso did. Shoto chuckled after following Izuku's gaze to where Kaminari was hanging by their feet with Shinso holding onto the tree branch like that famous cat poster. Kaminari called out to the other teen as Shiro emerged from the leaves like a startled bird. "Hey Shinso, how's it hanging?" Shiro yanked on his tape, which resulted in Kaminari slumping to the ground with a groan. "Oof, a little warning next time, Shiro." "Sure bud," Shiro said as Shinso landed on his feet. The three watched as Kaminari was yanked up to his feet by the purple-haired teen who simply said, "Let's go, Sparks." It didn't take long for them to shake themselves free of the tree right before the telltale sounds of shifting made them focus in on the task at hand. Pixie Bob's quirk is influencing the ground on the mountain. The best chance we have is to avoid them when needed and focus our attention on heading directly to the camp, Izuku explained, already running forward with the two of his friends at his side. "And we should help our classmates if they get stuck on the way there. It's inevitable considering what her quirk can do." Tenya grinned at them brightly while jumping to dodge an overgrown tree root. Hey, his hair did a little butterfly motion when he jumped. Plus, it is the responsible thing to do as heroes in training. "Earth Beast!" Izuku shouted as he recognized the move from Pixie Bob. A golem-like beast made with mossy rock legs and tree bark arms was a terrifying creature to face in battle. It was a powerful, long-ranged attack. But he had faith in his class that they would all make it down to the camp in no time. "Hey, do you think we can make the beast into a sled?" Shoto questioned as he slid across the grass with ease on the ice he was spewing to his feet. Oh, if Tenya could kick off its limbs or at least knock it down with his kicks, they could use it as a living board and skate their way down the mountain. It's a plan with a lot of variables depending on the strength of the beast, but it sounded all too promising to pass up. Tenya, aim for its limbs. Showed, start work on an ice slide because we will need it. On it, the two friends yelled in unison. Izuku continued to run, drawing one of the earth beast's attention to him with a smile growing on his face. "Let's see if this plan can work." "Ahhhhh!" Tenya exclaimed as the earth beast sled flew past their classmates at an alarming rate. Shoto's ice slide was the perfect size for the beast and just the right amount of slippery for a fast ride down the mountain, and just strong enough to keep the beast's arms from reaching out to them with a thick ice shackle. Shoto wasn't as vocal with his excitement and fear, but it showed on his face as he hurriedly made ice for the entire pathway down. Izuku laughed maniacally as they rushed through the trees on the belly of a beast, just like old times, huh? "Tree, move to the left," Tenya shouted in return, pushing at Shoto to make him steer the slide around the tree before they could crash into it. He could hear the confused and shocked yells of his classmates until he could hear Kirishima yell out to follow the ice. It wasn't long before he could spot the red-haired teen skating down the ice slide with his hardened torso, and Mina was using her acid to slide down faster than ever. And from the shouts he could hear, it seemed like the rest of their class was using Shoto's ice to their advantage as well. It wasn't long until they reached the bottom of the mountain. The entire team of wild pussycats were waiting for them, with Koda, Mandalay's nephew, standing near them with an angry pout. Izuku heard the slap before turning to see Eraserhead facepalming at the scene before him. Shoto iced the beast's torso so they could all slide off the creature made of rock and tree bark without a scratch. "That was amazing," Kaminari cheered, with Mina letting out a whoop in agreement. "Man, I wish the rest of the camp was like this." "Dude, aren't you taking remedial classes?" Kirishima asked. Kaminari slowly turned to Kirishima with a pout. "Why the hell did you remind me?" Kirishima started to awkwardly apologize, but Izuku's attention was focused on the kid next to the team. He hasn't seen Koda or his parents in quite a while. "Hey Koda," Izuku greeted, walking up to the boy with a smile. He knelt down a bit to look Koda in the eyes. "It's been a while since I've seen you. How have you been?" Izuku extended his hand right in time for him to block the incoming lunge aimed for the lower stomach area. Actually, the aimed attack was more towards him. "Koda, did you just try to punch me in my..." "Okay," Mandalay interrupted as Bakugo's choked laughter filled the momentary silence. "Since you guys are here, you can go ahead and eat up in the dining hall. I'm sure you must be so tired and hungry after the long trip here." Mandalay clapped her hands over Koda's mouth when he went to say something. "Go on ahead and feast, then rest as much as you can. You'll need it for tomorrow." With that, Mandalay disappeared with Kota, with Izuku's eyes following their figures as they walked inside a building on the camping grounds. Honorary Pussycat returns. The cries and laughs were overwhelming, as all of the students descended upon the long buffet tables filled with hearty food. It was amazing how quickly everyone had started to dig in. Sato headed directly to the desserts, while Koda headed directly towards the delicious vegetarian options. Shoji had his plate piled up as high as a mountain, while he could spot dark shadows swooping in with their claws to collect portions from different sections of the tables. Yaoyorozu had her plate piled up with so much hearty food in one hand and a large cup in her other hand, which was steaming hot. Izuku took his place right between his two best friends. Uraraka and Tsuyu took their seats across from them, with Shinso just an empty seat away from them. With a smile, Izuku readied his chopsticks to dig into his dinner when a large pair of muscular hands appeared on his shoulders. Ragdoll's hair dripped into his vision before her smiling face did. Then, a jingle of a bell was all he heard until he felt the familiar touch of a furry cat headband settling into the curls of his head. "Once a wild pussycat's always a wild pussycat," Ragdoll said, clapping her paws together and gaining some of his classmates' attention. Izuku swore he heard Shinso hide a snort behind his hand before the rest of his body disappeared under the table. Izuku reached up to feel the soft cat ears protruding from the headband. He turned back to face Ragdoll and Tiger with a smile. "Does that mean I don't have to participate in all of the camp?" "Ha ha ha," Tiger laughed, punching him in the arm to a point where it almost hurt because of his strength. "You're funny." Ragdoll giggled, patting his head before the two of them traveled down the buffet tablet to check in on the other summer camp participants. Pixie Bob was checking in on the Class 1B side of the room from what he could see of her pulling on Monoma's ear. "Yep, that's a no," Izuku mumbled, which made Shoto huff an amused breath beside him. "But hey, at least I get free cat ears." "You look adorable," Shoto commented, flicking the cat ear then fixing the headband on his head more securely. Shinso guffawed so loudly a few feet down the table from the gesture, which made Izuku hide a smile at the reaction. "Thank you," Izuku said, bringing a forkful of fluffy rice, roasted vegetables, and a ball of seared beef to his mouth. Uraraka cleared her throat, her eyes tearing up like she was holding back from reacting. She asked, "Honorary wild pussycat, what's the story behind that?" "Well, you know, my dad is connected to the heroes in more ways than one, so the team met me when I was younger and made me an honorary member," Izuku explained, reaching up a hand to feel the furry ears. "Wait, did they add some jewelry on it?" He could feel some cold metal decorating it. "I didn't know I still had that position." Ida hummed, dabbing the corners of his mouth with a napkin. "I'm surprised Mandalay and Pixie Bob didn't immediately call you out as one at the beginning." "It might be that maybe they don't know that the class already knows," Izuku answered, then furrowed his eyebrows. "Uncle Eraser should have already told them, so it could have been the others who wanted to crown him with ears. Pixie Bob was the one who personally placed the ears in his head back then, or that Pixie Bob really wanted to do it." "Class 1B doesn't though, right?" Uraraka questioned, throwing a glance to the other class who weren't looking their way at all. They were too concerned with Tetsu stocking up his plate with most of the meat on the table. Izuku frowned. "I think Monoma does, but he hasn't said anything." Shoto paused in his chewing to look at him. Then he lowered his voice to a whisper to ask, "Does he know about the other thing?" "Oh, he definitely knows," Izuku chuckled. "Monoma should already know about his quirklessness due to his quirk, but both classes, given a few exceptions, should not know about his lack of a quirk," Izuku hummed. "Speaking of, I should probably tell the others about it soon. I'm not sure if anyone else except Monoma picked up on it yet." Ida turned with a mouth full of food and on an empty orange peel in his hand. He held up a hand as he swallowed. "Excuse me, I wouldn't worry about it too much," Ida said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Everyone in the class would be stupid to act any differently than how they are now." "What are you guys talking about?" Uraraka spoke up, drawing Tsuyu's attention with a soft Kiro. "Nothing much, just another well-kept secret of mine. You might find out, or maybe you never will," Izuku smiled. "Who knows?" After dinner, the team of 4 pro heroes instructed the 2 classes to 4 separate saunas to clean up and relax in the warm waters after such a long day. They were all given complimentary towels and robes for their bath and soak in the sauna. Kaminari was the first one to rinse and jump straight into the hot spa water naked. He popped back up with his blonde hair draped over his face like the cursed monster that crawls out of televisions. "Come on in, the water is so fine," Kaminari commented, his skin quickly turning red from the steaming sauna and so hot. And the other guys didn't hesitate to make their way to the steaming water bubbling in the perfect stones framing the bath. Ajiro was already in there tussling with Kaminari, grabbing onto his tail, and Siro clutching onto his neck. Takagami was crossing his arms and looking peaceful despite the waterfall raining down on his head, while dark shadows snapped their shadow beak at the falling water droplets. Shinso was having casual conversations with Koda, who was signing something about cats. Katsuki was like a starfish, taking up most of the room in a secluded part of the hot spring that was framed with more grayish stones. Kirishima was treading water to chase Sato, while Shoji was lounging with his big arms out of the water. Izuku was busy relaxing in the warm water with both of his friends, with Shoto stealing his cat ears off his head, which made him suddenly remember that he forgot to take them off. Shoto had smugly put the ears on his head when Izuku had spotted Koda walking along the length of the wall at the very top. "Koda, what are you doing up there?" Izuku called out in concern, seeing the young boy with an oar paddle like a soldier protecting a stronghold with a spear. Koda barely gave their side a glance as the kid held his head up. He could hear Koda huff from where he was below when Koda answered loudly, "I'm making sure you bastards behave." "Oh really?" Mina's unmistakable voice called out from the other side, which made the dark-haired kid turn around and then freeze. "Thanks, Koda." Koda was completely frozen before his head jerked up to avoid looking down any longer. Izuku was on his feet before he knew it, because he had a bad feeling growing in his gut that was only proven when Koda was slipping. Izuku was jumping out of the working and grabbing a towel to hide his privates when his friend Ida was already springing up from the water. Ida yelled, running to the wall with his plush towel in his hands on it. Ida rushed forward with his engines propelling him towards the falling kid as Izuku quickly made his way to the wall. It was hard to hold himself back from running too quickly because of the water dripping from his body. But by the time he got there, Ida had already caught Koda, who was lying unconscious in his arms. "You can give him to me." Izuku held out his arms to take Koda from Ida. Ida handed off the young boy to Izuku gently to not disturb Koda. "I'll take him to Mandalay to see if he's hurt." "Okay, we'll be here," Ida whispered. His glasses were a bit foggy at the edges with noticeable smudges on it. Did he miss Ida using his fingers as windshield wipers to his glasses lens? "Is everything okay?" Shoto called out with his green-colored ears with white tufts on top of his white and red hair. Wow, he looked like Christmas, especially with the little jewelry on the ears too. The sight made him hold back a chuckle. "Don't worry, I have this under control," Izuku called out with a quick smile on his face. He started walking back into the resort with Koda slumped in his arms. "Enjoy your time in the spring, everyone." Izuku sat awkwardly with a wet towel around his waist and a robe placed on him backward. Both plus materials were like a blanket on him as he relaxed his bare skin against the couch cushion behind him. Mandalay sat to his side with Koda laid out on the couch between them. Mandalay was monitoring the boy like a hawk with a worried expression all over her face. Her paw gloves set to the side as she gently laid her fingers on Koda's face. "I apologize for how he tried to greet you when you came here," Mandalay said, her eyes glancing at him. "Things have been going a little rough for him lately, so please don't hold it against him." "I'm sorry to hear that. Is everything okay?" The last thing he heard about Koda was around the time that Muscular attacked his parents, the Waterhouse duo. At the time, he had become aware of the villains successfully killing off heroes around their patrol area, so he had jumped ahead of the curve to help fill in details for the police and heroes in the area to know. From what he could see from the attacks, Godu Amasuji, also known as Muscular, was clearly a sadistic man. He had a clear thirst for blood in his movements when striking down an opponent. He openly enjoys tormenting his victims until they die by his hands from the gory videos he was able to dissect. Izuku made sure to send an alert to anyone in that area, especially the heroes of the brutal villain, with details about his registered quirk if they were to come across him. The number one thing he advised was to attack in a large group by either teaming up ahead of patrol or calling in backup for it. That's exactly how the Water Hose duo, Koda's parents, were able to barely survive Muscular's attack. From what he heard from the news, the water hose duo called in backup, so a team of 10 heroes was able to defeat the villain Muscular long enough to be sent to jail, with one less eye and missing 4 of his teeth. However, the whole hero team did not come out unscathed. 4 out of the Gene lost their lives to the sheer power of Muscular's quirk. Koda's father had lost his leg, another had lost both of their arms, and many others had multiple injuries throughout their bodies. Koda's father was able to puncture and pull out Muscular's eye in a duo attack, and due to Muscular's sudden loss of sight, the remaining 6 took him down with all of their might combined. However, he did hear news about Muscular escaping about a week ago with no other appearances since then. Maybe that is what has Koda on edge, considering his parents are still recovering from the attack that happened months ago. Or it could be for a number of different reasons. He read enough psychology books to know that it could be a number of factors combined to have Koda feeling this way. Koda's parents want to get back into the hero's life together after his father gets used to his prosthetics, Mandalay admitted, which forced him to look back at her in sources. They were returning. Really, they're actually trying to check out smaller regions to see about continuing their work there. It would be better and less stressful than before, but Izuku could tell where this was heading. He doesn't want them to get back into it. Mandalay chuckled weakly. Who wouldn't be worried after how close they were to dying the last time? Do they know about how he feels? Izuku asked, looking down at the sleeping kid who had slightly nuzzled his head further into the throw pillows of the couch. I think they are getting a hint because of his behavior, but I'm not sure how much they know about how hurt he is, Mandalay admitted. Her eyes shone as she talked about the situation, one of her hands gently passing through Koda's hair. I'm watching over him for the week as his parents try to talk about the future. I'm not sure what they are going to choose. Izuku bit down on his lip as he considered the situation. Koda and him were similar in a way where their parents were heroes much like other students at his school. However, the situations are different. His papa Nezu was not a really active hero. He came in on specific situations and delayed primarily with villains to let out his sadistic tendencies. Koda's parents were a duo that were really active on the coast and seasides, but they dealt with smaller time crimes most of the time. If his father got hurt, he felt like his father would forego active duty altogether and stick to being a principal and behind the scenes. But with Koda's parents, they might take this attack as an unforeseen one-time thing and go back to their regular patrol of stopping robberies and more. Well, I hope they choose a better balance of hero work and their personal life, Izuku said quietly. The sound between them was the soft snoring of Koda and the very mumbled shouts from the outside from both classes having fun in the hot springs. Koda needs that kind of balanced life to have a good childhood. He needs to be considered in any decision they make. Mandalay nodded softly. The pro hero looked up to him and tried to smile. I just want what's best for him. I know, Izuku replied. He looked down at Koda once again, noticing just how small he looked curled up between them. He was just a kid. He didn't need to worry about his parents dying this soon in his life. I do too. Pop music and emotional talks with cold food. What was endurance training like for Class 1A? He could imagine everyone in the school, mostly those who are not in the hero course, to be asking such questions. What do the hero course students do in order to push their quirks to the limit? The answer is simple, pushing their quirks to the absolute limit, but it takes place in the wilderness. Shoto was sitting in a tub of water, constantly changing from making it a hot as lava sauna into a mini ice rink, all while sitting inside that water. Ida was running around the unsteady ground at top speed with some jugs of orange juice nearby for him to refuel. But he was only allowed to refuel if he kept running during it, which resulted in every getting a glimpse of Ida running around in an orange juice-stained gray shirt. Shinso looked like he was having a massive migraine, but was trying to push through it as he tried to command Mandalay again. Zero was on the cliffside screaming as he ejected tape from his elbows. Bakugo was yelling as he made explosion after dunking his head in boiling, hot water. Momo was pushing herself to dig into an entire table of sugary sweets that only made them look like exceptionally tired mukbangers on HeroTube. Now if all of the classmates with quirks were doing that, what would become of the one without a quirk? He would be so happy to write that answer down for future reference if his hand didn't feel like they were on fire and his mind wasn't running wild. Tiger had decided his analysis was the equivalent of a quirk due to how skilled he was, but it came with a hellish amount of distractions that he was sure could be used in sensory torture. Brain-numbing pop music blasted in his ears. as he tried to focus on the quirk being shown on a grainy video being shown in front of him. There was barely any visual, and the outside noise was distracting his mind from really hunting into the scraps of footage to pinpoint exactly what it was. Nevertheless, he pushed through and wrote down any possible guesses about the quirk being shown, despite how many times he had to stop himself from writing down the lyrics of the song he was listening to. This is to test your mind and see how much it can push through. After this, we will be testing your body and your mind at the same time. Be prepared. He had the pop music echoing in his head as everyone slowed down for a very quick lunch break that was more of an energy break since food was not made for them, and they had a 15-minute time limit for the midday. But even though it wasn't technically a lunch break, he chugged down water and stuffed his mouth with some of the fruits he could find in the kitchen. Ida was right next to him, chugging down orange juice like he was in an eating marathon, but for drinking. Drinkathon, was that an event? But as soon as the 15-minute alarm went off, the students were dragged up to their feet and went straight back to driving their energy into everything. This time he needed to break down his analyzing work verbally as he trained his body via Tiger running after him like he was a serial killer, chasing him through the woods in broad daylight. He could feel his lungs burning and his throat drying out as he tried his best to multitask, shouting, breathing, dodging attacks, and running. His throat felt so dry that he could barely soothe it by swallowing the small saliva in his mouth. Starstricker is a European hero stationed in Milan after a move from Paris. Her quirk is faster. Izuku screeched in such a way that reminded him of his pre-puberty days with the high pitch he had reached. Then, he was suddenly off running towards a rocky structure as Tiger charged after him. Starlight. The quirk is called this because of the beams of energy that the user gets from moonbathing at night, however this makes them at a disadvantage due to her quirk. I can't hear you, Tiger shouted, the thundering sound of their heavy footsteps echoing behind him as the muscular hero ran after him. Louder, the villain will win, you don't, and you and your team will die. Izuku kept his pace as Tiger chased after him, with his hair being blown back once from Tenya racing past him. His training was a special hell created specifically for him, but he couldn't complain because all of the students with him on this trip had similar tailored hellish training for them. Work harder. The disadvantage to her quirk is that the energy is gathered by the moon and not the sun. So when her lunar energy runs out, she can't use her quirk at all and has to rely on the self-defense skills as well as her dance-like fighting ability shown in several. Izuku helped as a tree branch fell behind him, the leaves brushing against his back while he escaped from the hero's clutches. Is it too late to go back to the tortuously bad music? Momo aimed her lighter at one of the fire pits while Shoto breathed out a flame onto the other. Both of the fire pits lit up with orange flames that hit the underside of the pan and pot above it. Mandalay had told them that afternoon that they were all preparing their food from then on until the end of the camp. Pixie Bob and Ragdoll popped up from behind bushes with boxes and bags filled with food and ingredients. So now they were all working on making a curry. Yes, Mina cheered, throwing her fist into the air as she jumped up. Then she winced when she landed back down. We're on the way to a delicious meal, a meal worthy of the upcoming heroes we are all going to become. At least we don't have to scavenge for our food, Kaminari sighed, gesturing to the woods they were surrounded by. I don't think I could play a game of guessing which thing can kill me after what happened today. I'm too tired for that. I brought a book for that, so we could use that if we need it, Izuku commented, making Kaminari look relieved for a split second before his expression dropped to genuine worry. Although he didn't have time to think about possible specimens in the forest just yet, especially after the exhausting day he and his class had, Izuku's thoughts traveled to the other class who were having their own barbecue on the other side of the building. The smell of grilled vegetables, mushrooms, and meat filled the air. Wait, don't talk about it, Hagakure protested, the sleeves of her shirt waving in the air. What if they hear us and make it part of our training in a few days? I wouldn't be able to take it. Shinso groaned from his place at the picnic table. His head was in his hands with a small pile of peeled potatoes off to his side with the peeler at the other. Please stop yelling. Oh, sorry Shinso, Hagakure apologized quickly before Kaminari made his way over to the purple-haired teen. The blonde nudged the teen with his hip. Are you feeling okay? Izuku walked over with the trash can to start collecting the scraps of skin and bits they weren't going to put in the meal. I feel like my brain is melting inside my skull, Shinso muttered. He looked up with a narrowed stare like he was squinting. Those purple eyes landed on a spot behind Izuku. How's your elbows and your tape? Izuku turned to see a very tired Siro paused in his walking. His dark eyes looked vacant as one of his hands gently prodded at his uniquely shaped elbows. My elbows feel warm like I got rug burn inside, and my tape doesn't feel like tape anymore. Siro groaned, tilting his head down with a jerk of his neck. Then he raised his head slightly to address the people around him. No one can ask me for tape. I don't think I can go on if I do. Bakugo's voice made Izuku turn around to find the blonde glaring down at the cut-up vegetables that Uraraka was working on. Your cuts are all uneven and look so damn shitty. Give me that. Bakugo snatched the knife from the brunette and immediately started chopping like he was a cook in a limited-time cooking show. Uraraka's eyes sparkled at the quick movements. She clasped her fingers together as she praised him. Wow, you're good at this. What, you thought I would be fucking incompetent with this? Bakugo spun the knife in his hand and stuck it into the wooden cutting block. Hell no. Gyro, are you good? Siro asked, which made Izuku turn again to see what he was referring to. He found the answer when he saw Gyro curled up on a bench with her hands covering her ears. Does anyone hear ringing, or is that just me? The purple-haired teen questioned. Izuku shook his head, which made the girl sigh and tap her ears with her hand. I'm doing good mostly. I think my ears are still ringing. Izuku approached. Can I do anything to help? No, I'm fine, Gyro said. She tried to give a reassuring smile that was a bit strained at the corners. Trust me, this will go away in no time. Izuku stepped away with a nod. He wasn't going to prod, but he hoped that she felt better soon, because he knew that they were going to do this all over again tomorrow. If not, it will be even worse. He heard upperclassmen whine about it all throughout the years at UA, especially when he traveled through the vents. This pot is going to be so tasty I can feel it, Mina yelled out from somewhere behind him. Tsuyu, how's the rice looking? Kiro, it looks good. Tsuyu's calm voice responded, accompanied by a clinking sound. He glanced over to see Tsuyu stirring at the rice with a long, wooden spoon. All right, Mina kept her voice cheerful like she wanted to keep the energy up via her verbal praises. I really like this. We should cook together again like the next time we have a pool party. That sounds fun, Hagakure called out from the curry station. Ida called out to respond. As long as proper rules are followed and we clean up after ourselves, I'm sure we would run into no problems by scheduling it. Yes, Mina and Hagakure cheered together in response to Ida's answer. It didn't take long for everyone to prepare a huge feast of curry with a multitude of vegetable stir-fry and side dishes. The class had gathered around at 2 long wooden tables to dig into the dishes they made together. After Izuku had eaten his curry, he started looking around and couldn't see Koda. Would he be eating inside? Did the wild pussycats make dinner inside for themselves? When Mandalay started walking past them, Izuku jumped to his feet to reach his aunt figure. Have you seen Koda? She sighed. He hasn't been around since the training started again around lunchtime. Mandalay hummed. She grimaced before turning her body to tilt her head towards the mountain past the trees. He goes off on his own sometimes near the mountain over there. There's a special cave he claimed as his own the first time he visited. There's a big chance he might still be there. I tried to get him to come back 2 hours ago, but he didn't want me anywhere near his spot. Okay, Izuku turned his gaze to the mountains, trying to find an obvious cave despite how far away he was. He hummed. I'll go check and bring some food to him just in case he's hungry. Would you? Mandalay grinned, her gloved paws grabbed at his hands to pat the back of his hands gently. That would be kind of you. Please make sure he's all right. Izuku nodded before an idea appeared in his head. He could bring Koda food and try to spot some poisonous herbs on the way there or back. Izuku took a moment to gather a serving on a new plate while leaving his food abandoned on the table. Where are you going? Ida asked, his blue eyebrows raising up above the line of his glasses. Izuku nodded his head towards his half-eaten plate of food with a grin. Hey, you can have my food if you want. I'm going to bring a plate to Koda. Shoto hummed, jabbing his chopsticks onto his old plate almost immediately. More rice for me then. Izuku skipped away while Ida waved at him and Shoto stuffed his mouth with the leftover rice. He made sure to make a very quick stop to his room to grab 2 little bottles just in case he came into contact with something worthy of bringing back. With the plate of food and empty containers, Izuku headed off into the forest towards the mountains that Mandalay pointed out to him. Since Koda got up there, it shouldn't be hard to climb it. Maybe there was a constructed walkway up to it in some way. It took some time navigating through the trees, but he was thankful that the sunset's warm colors painted against the leaves and bark. He released a sigh of relief when he realized that he was right about the constructed walkway up to the mountain ledge. It was like a slanted ramp to the top that seemed carved into the rock. Izuku ran his way up and started calling out for the young kid. "Koda, Koda!" He kept repeating the call until he ended up outside a dark cave near the edge of the ledge. A cave tucked into a corner with large boulders and sharp rock formations formed around the cave opening. Izuku ducked his head to look inside the dark, seeing the form of Koda due to the warm colors peeking into the cave. "There you are." Koda's spiked hat moved as his head tilted up. He could barely see the glare under the brim of his hat, but his annoyance was clear in his tone. "What are you doing here?" Izuku hummed, shifting his feet to raise the plate in his head over his head and tuck his other arm to his chest. "I am but a humble waiter serving up a delicacy made by several teenage school students." With a flourish of his hand, he lowered the plate to Koda's eye level. "Ta-da! It looks," and Koda trailed off, looking between his face and the plate of steadily growing cold food. "Edible." "Thank you." Izuku grinned at the kid who looked like he was about to poke the pile of curry with a stick to make sure it wasn't going to move. "We worked hard on it." Koda turned up his nose at the plate with a look of distaste. He moved his face away so he was no longer looking at the plate or him. "I'm not hungry." "Well, then I can just leave this here for you to eat later." Izuku lowered the plate to the cavern floor, the food looking red in the direct light of the sunset. "But you might want to protect it from any of the cave critters around here." "It'll be fine." Koda glanced over his shoulder with a glare at where he was standing outside the cave entrance. "Just leave me alone." Izuku, not one to back down, swayed in his feet yet made no movement to leave, a fact that Koda acknowledged with an exaggerated sigh. Hey, didn't you hear what I said, dummy?" "Yes, I did hear what you said." Izuku nodded with a smile, then he tilted forward to smile mischievously at the young boy. But several mice inside a human skin tend to ignore such words meant to deflect from the current situation. Shut up," Koda responded. "I know you're a human." "Am I?" Izuku questioned with a tilt his head. Just then, a peek of the young boy he had met before peeked through with a small smirk tilting up at the corner of his lips. Koda replied with a shaky hand. "Well, you must not be in a bad enough mood to push me out since you're joking around with me." Izuku jokes, watching as Koda shrunk back into himself. He let his smile drop a bit as he knelt down to the ground. He shifted into a better position to sit across from Koda, who was looking away and staring into the cave. "Although if you do prefer me to go, I will. I don't want to push my presence on you. If anything, I just want to spend some time with you." At that last sentence, Koda turned his head to look directly at him with such sad eyes that it made Izuku pause. "Why?" Izuku swallowed. He glanced away from those hurt dark eyes only to stare right back at him with all the honesty he could muster with his facial expression. "Because I haven't seen you in a while." "You make it sound so easy," Koda huffed. "If it's so easy, why is it so hard for them?" Koda asked, his voice getting a little louder with the cavern making his voice amplify in the small space. "If you can be here, why can't they?" Koda's voice broke in the middle of the sentence, tears starting to trail down his cheeks. He sniffled. "Why am I always on second thought? Why can't they just stay with me?" Izuku has had plenty of knowledge on psychology. He should know exactly what to say in this situation to comfort Koda. However, as he stared at Koda's shaking shoulders, he didn't know where to start. He didn't know what to say first to make Koda feel better, to feel happier. "I don't know exactly." "Of course you don't," Koda immediately countered, making him freeze up in his words. "Your dad stays with you all the time, so you have no idea what it's like." "I may not," Izuku said so quietly it was almost mumbled. He couldn't refute that, but both of their situations are different. "But..." Koda clicked his tongue, completely closing off from him by turning his entire body away from him. "Just leave me alone." "Okay," Izuku said quietly, rising to his feet and brushing off the dirt on the back of his pants. "I'll leave the food here for you, and please be careful on the way back to the resort," Izuku said, watching to see if Koda would react to any of his words, yet the boy seemed to be completely done with conversation. "Try to leave before it gets too dark. I don't want you slipping off something dangerous." Koda said nothing in return. I'll leave you be, Izuku whispered, backing away from Koda and through the cave entrance. With a sigh, Izuku turned away from the cave, the cold food, and the sad boy who he had failed to comfort. Izuku took his time climbing back down the mountain. Then he walked through the trees towards the resort even as the sunset's brightness started to be washed away by the blue night sky. He didn't look too long at the plants he passed by. A few looked interesting, but this wasn't the time to look at them, not with the feeling in his stomach. Izuku was too focused on the fact that Koda was in that cave all alone and pushing away the people who wanted to make sure he was okay. His thoughts kept second-guessing his actions. Should he have left him alone, or was leaving him alone the better thing? Well, hopefully the next day will be better. Maybe he could have a longer heart-to-heart conversation with Koda tomorrow after he trained. Here a little extra bit I didn't know where to fit. Deleted scene. Izuku, what? It's not like we are planning on doing anything dangerous at camp. We wouldn't be killing someone. Shoto coughing, Hasu. Ida places hand on shoulder like a worried lover. SHHHH. We'll get you a cough drop when we get back to camp, my dear fiancé. Slowly covers Shoto's mouth. Only Shoto could prevent forest fires, so why is it still burning? The following day he had no time to try and get some herbs in the forest. Instead, it was exactly the same as the day before with the amount of training he and the other students had to do. He was back to brain-numbing music distractions and physical training while keeping his mind sharp during it all. Overall, it was basically the same day as the day before. Yet it felt different in a way he could not describe. Maybe it was due to the fact he woke up with a queasy stomach after scarfing down a chocolate-covered marshmallow treat in the middle of the night. Or maybe it was because the sweet snack was swiftly followed by the cheese Aoyama gave him after the blonde came back from the bathroom area. Or it could have been the side swipe punch that Shoto delivered to his abdomen when he unconsciously scooted closer to his cot in the middle of the night. Either way, something was churning inside his gut that set his nerves on edge through most of the day. Izuku grinded his teeth together as he looked around the forest area. There was no visible danger, and there were heroes on the scene that would help if anything were to happen. The last time he felt something like this was right before the USJ. Was something happening where he couldn't see? No, that must not be it. Izuku shook his head. It must be the never-ending training putting his nerves on edge. The training was very overwhelming, so it must be causing some sort of effect in his brain. Yet the feeling rumbling in his gut did not fade away before, during, or after the third day of the training camp. So during dinner, he snuck away from the rest of the take to approach Mandalay, who was surveying the students. She looked up when he approached, and he could have sworn that the cat ears on her head perked up, but it could have been the movement of her head. Hey, Auntie Mandalay, Izuku greeted casually, hiding the unsureness pretty well given the fact that the hero did not suspect that anything was amiss, at least from where he was looking. Mandalay hummed, giving him a calming smile. What's up, cat? This could be weird to say, but can you make sure the team stays close to the camp to patrol the area? His request made Mandalay tilt her head a little, likely in confused caution from the expression growing on her face. I've been having a weird feeling since I woke up, which might be nothing, but I don't know. Whatever expression that his aunt was making was wiped away to show off a reassuring grin that he often saw heroes give to regular citizens. No harm in double-checking. She winked at that statement. I'll make sure everyone keeps an eye out. She bent down a bit and laid a hand on the top of his curls. If any of us see anything suspicious, we'll start the evacuation plan, Mandalay promised. Right, Izuku felt a bit better from her promising words, but there was still something stuck in his throat. He coughed. Maybe it was just allergies with the pollen. They were outside most of the day during this training camp. It could be he is just having a reaction. Thank you. No problem. Mandalay's voice was soft as her hand nudged him forward towards the picnic tables where his class was eating fiercely. Now head back to your friends before your dinner gets cold or someone else eats it. Izuku nodded and separated himself from the pro-hero to rejoin the table. He looked around the area and frowned when he couldn't spot Koda. He guessed the kid was back at the cave again sulking, but he just hoped that Koda took some food with him this time. He settled back into his seat with a thump which made both Shoto and Tenya look towards him. Are you all right? Tenya asked. Izuku waved off their worries while he scooted in to get closer to the table. His plate of mouthwater food was right in front of him, just waiting. "I'm fine." "Are you still feeling bad?" Shoto asked in between his bites of food. "We can make some s'mores after dinner." Tenya quickly agreed. Izuku smiled. "Yeah, that sounds good." Izuku gazed down at his plate, only to freeze when he noticed something was off. Izuku frowned at the noticeable spot of his rice that was missing and slowly turned to Shoto, who was chewing with his cheeks stuffed. His gray and blue eyes glanced at him before slowly looking away. Izuku let out a breath, then dug right into the grilled yakitori. After dinner, most of the students went back inside with Aizawa and Vlad King escorting off the small group of students for the start of their remedial courses. They were barely there for an hour before Pixie Bob told everyone to start making their way outside for a night training exercise. Everyone started making their way out slowly except for two, him and Aoyama. Aoyama had disappeared to the bathroom and he went to his suitcase for one reason: the feather. He is not paranoid, this was just a precaution. Plus, when else would he use the feather? He has been feeling a terrible twisting in his guts for the entire day, so the feather could maybe alleviate some of those worries. If not the feather, then the backup plan that his father enacted would need to be activated. Izuku's hand hovers over his watch before drawing away and tucking the feather into the inside pocket of his thin outer jacket. He fixed the hood of the jacket and scratched at the back of his neck while he walked outside to join the rest of the class. Aoyama rushed out after him, his hand running through his blonde hair then flattening down his shirt. "All right, this exercise game is going to be the test of courage," Pixie Bob announced. Ragdoll tilted her head with that signature smile. "The game will take place in the forest along the trail. Class 1B are already there to be your scarers, where their goal is to scare as many of you as possible, while you all must find cards with your names on it to prove that you went into the forest. The classes will switch as you will have to scare the other class," Pixie Bob said with two pointed fingers at them. "The class that scared the most students compared to the other class will be the winner." Ragdoll pumped up her cat-paw-gloved hand into the air. "Now it's time to pair everyone up into teams of two." Ragdoll and Pixie Bob made the teams slowly by each of them calling out one name until there were 10 teams. Except there was one team who did not look happy to be paired with each other. "Why do I have to be stuck with him?" Shoto grumbled, glancing towards Bakugo, who looked pissed when the first team went in. "Don't think like that, Shoto," Tenya tried to cheer up their friend, who did not look that enthused to be anywhere near the blonde. "You probably won't have to talk with him during the entire trail." "Yeah, think about what you can do with him. No murder," Izuku clarified when he saw Shoto's eyes sparkle with mischief. Shoto twisted his lip and snapped his fingers like a villain in an animated show, getting his scenes foiled. "Dang." Tenya's lips twitched up as he watched him, glancing at Izuku with a barely hidden smile. "Well then, I'll go talk with my partner. Have fun with Shinso, Izuku." "Thanks," Izuku saluted to his tall friend, who sauntered over to the growing crowd of teammates who were waiting for their cue to go in. "See you on the other side." "Shinso," Izuku called out, rushing to get to the purple-haired teen who was leaning on one of his legs while the other leg kicked at the dirt. "Hey," Shinso greeted without the same enthusiasm. His purple eyes looked back at him with what looked like deeper eye bags. "Have you got any plans to not get scared?" His eyebrows scrunched up as the boy tilted his head to look over Izuku's shoulder to the forest. The teen sighed. "After all the harsh training, I thought this was going to be worse, and I'm not sure how it applies to our training. You can see it as a game to just lighten the mood, or you can view it as a stealth training exercise," Izuku said. That last sentence got Shinso's attention almost immediately, which made him smile. "Think about it. In order to scare someone, you have to catch them off guard, which means being silent and using the surroundings to your advantage." Izuku raised up his finger, then added, "And you can use this time to think about how to make your quirk or set of skills scary." "Huh, that's actually a pretty good way to explain this." Shinso straightened up, giving up on digging a shallow hole with the tip of his sneaker. The teen smirked. "And I know a thing or two about being scary. I've had some experience back in my middle school being in a haunted house during the culture festivals." "Excellent," Izuku rubbed his hands together. Shinso might have some good ideas on how to really set things up. If they both work together, they might make some good ideas on how to scare the pants off the others when their turn comes around. It's a good idea to start planning for our turn, at least before we head inside the forest where the other class can hear us. They talked while they watched each team get called into the forest. Uraraka and Tsuyu, Shoji and Takayami, Bakugo and Todoroki, and then it was their turn. Their discussion hushed into a more normal, pleasant conversation as they talked about their personalized training that they were getting. Mostly about the similarities since the training focused on their ability to focus in mentally while juggling basic physical fighting. Shinso paused in the middle of his walking, which drew Izuku to slow down in his steps. He walked up to his side right as a campfire smell invaded his nostrils. "Why do I smell burning?" Shinso asked with a tense expression, his tired purple eyes searching the darkening sky by the shelter. "Is there a fire?" "No, we cleared away the fires from cooking dinner," Izuku replied slowly, beginning to search the sky for any remnants of smoke. The fireplace or sauna fire could be burning, but they were both started with coal, so it shouldn't have that kind of scent. He scrunched his eyebrows as he strained to search through the trees for any sign of smoke coming from the start of the path. There shouldn't be anything burning. If there was, we should be able to see some kind of trail of smoke. Izuku turned towards Shinso, who was looking in the opposite direction where their path was headed. The green-haired teen turned around to see the stunning sight of a billow of dark smoke rising above the trees further ahead of them. A forest fire, a blaze starting right in the middle of the forest, was not good. That would spread fast, especially since they have not had rain in the few days they have been here. The dry grass would make the fire spread quickly. They needed to get everyone out of the forest and evacuate. That smoke further up the path in the middle of the forest. Shinso furrowed his brows, his hands going up to his neck like he was going to grasp at an invisible special scarf. "Did your friend freak out or something?" "No, Shoto has great control over both of his sides." Izuku denied the unsaid question instantly. There was no way that Shoto's fire could get that unchecked, especially since he could quell any out-of-control blaze with his ice. Izuku continued as he thought back to the other fire-powered teen in their class. He was paired with Bakugo and he knows how to handle his explosions. Nothing made sense. Why was this happening? Izuku added, neither one of them would have been careless enough to set the forest on fire. "But no one else has a fire quirk," Shinso uttered. "And Monoma is back with the remedial class, so he can't be out here copying their quirk either." The purple-haired teen smoothed back his wild purple hair with both of his hands and blew air out of his mouth. Izuku watched him stress for a moment before patting his back to reassure him. "There's no time to think about what caused it. We need to make sure everyone gets out before the fire spreads too far." Shinso nodded at his words, relaxing his tense shoulders. "I don't want anyone getting hurt." An image of Kota sitting with his knees curled up to his chest in a cave appeared in his mind. Suddenly, it felt like his heart dropped out of his chest. "Kota." Shinso looked over to him in mild confusion, his lips mouthing the name back to him. "Who?" "Kota, Mandalay's nephew," Izuku replied. "He had to go help him. He might get lost in the smoke if he tried to make his way down. It depends on how quickly the fire, therefore the smoke, will spread. He wasn't there at dinner, so he must be in his place in the mountains." He bounced on the balls of his feet like he was about to launch like a string pull toy. "I need to go." "Hey!" Shinso held out his hand to stop him from bouncing away from him. Then he paused, his gaze slowly turning over his shoulder. Shinso held up a hand, then pointed with 2 fingers to where a plume of green smoke was creeping through the bushes. Izuku grabbed the other teen's wrist and dragged him back away from the approaching fog. There was a moment of silence as the two of them steadily backed away off the path to avoid the green gas creeping towards them. Shinso whispered, "I think that's gas." "It is," Izuku confirmed with a mumble. He swallowed, pulling Shinso backwards with him. "We have to get back to the camp fast, but we have to get Kota and damn it." Izuku let go of Shinso and twisted on his heel, gesturing for his friend to follow after him. Shinso did not hesitate to run with him away from the 2 smoking dangers. Okay, he needs to stay focused. No catchy songs to distract him away from the goal. Why would there be a sudden fire in the forest? If Bakugo accidentally did it, there would have been an explosion before it. If Shoto accidentally did it, he would have caught it before it became such a problem. Hell, if either of them had set a fire from being scared, it would have been dealt with immediately with Shoto's ice. The fact that it was growing so quickly, without any attempt to stop it, seemed deliberate. Something in his gust reached an invisible hand inside his organs and twisted the sensitive meat like a ghost was stabbing him. "Look, we'll stick to each other for now. There is safety in numbers, right?" Shinso asked, his breaths coming out short because of their run. Izuku slowed to a stop, which made Shinso almost stumble over his feet in order to stop his stride. The teen took in heavy breaths as he looked back at him in concern. What's wrong? This could be a villain attack. Izuku spoke without thinking, watching Shinso immediately freeze at his statement. Think about it. A forest fire and the mysterious gas that appeared out of nowhere right when we are in an outside game. This can't be a coincidence. He was not enjoying how Shinso was looking sick with fear at his explanation. Isn't there a chance that this could be part of the game? Shinso asked with desperate hope hanging onto his words. He shook his head. The wild pussycats would not do this type of thing. None of them would start a forest fire purposely. They are very active in saving the environment, Izuku defended. He looked away from Shinso to survey the area around them and was thankful the gas was not getting close. Wild pussycats, ragdoll. That same feeling creeped up his throat as his words caught up with his thoughts. Ragdoll should be out here with them to get the children out, yet he hasn't heard her shouting or seen 1 inch of her costume yet. Ragdoll would have been sent out of the forest if they noticed anything, especially since Koda was out here. She could be trapped somewhere in the fire, or she could be passed out because of the gas. Izuku started to mumble as he looked around the close area. That must mean that she could be around here somewhere. What? Shinobu asked, looking panicked as he searched the area around them too. We have to find Ragdoll, Izuku clarified while looking at the sky to pinpoint where the smoke was. He started to jog in towards the smoke while Shinso choked on air behind him. Follow me. Shinso immediately followed after him, but he did not exactly look happy about the direction they were heading in, towards the fire. Yes, Izuku yelled back at him over the sound of their hurried footsteps. Trust me. Last time I trusted you, Shinso cut himself off with a breath. I got wind-bombed across acres of land. Yeah, and it was amazing, Izuku grinned back at the purple-haired teen who was starting to catch up to his pace. All that training was paying off. Now come on. They both raced through the trees further away from the set path. The trees got more crowded, which slowed them down a few seconds as they had to change courses to avoid stumbling over roots or over each other. Hey. Damn it, Shinso cursed as he slowed down 1 or 2 paces behind him. Izuku glanced behind to watch the teen running like he was in a marathon. The teen called out to him to question, "Why did I become friends with you again?" Because I didn't leave you alone, Izuku answered immediately after the last word left Shinso's mouth. It's not like the other could complain since his plan worked out perfectly. Shinso sighed as he jumped over a partially large tree root. Yeah, that seems right. A broken red feather. Ida was walking with Ajiro down the dirt pathway through the forest. So far, he had been taken off guard at least once due to the other class, but he knew he was making his class proud since he was not falling for the same scare tricks. He grew up with Izuku, Shoto, and his big brother. He knows all of the best scare pranks. However, the one Class 1B student whose head popped up from the ground truly gave him a scare so bad he grabbed onto Ajiro, who, in turn, had a grip on him. Most of the other small stops they passed by were not as scary as he originally thought it would be. However, the student that can disappear into shadows was very close to making him scream like a banshee if it wasn't. Ajiro kept glancing at him during their mostly leisurely walk. In fact, it had been a while since they had spotted Class 1B students or got scared by them. Ajiro let out a deep breath, then turned his head to him with a confused frown. This might be a bit personal, but are you, Shoto, and Izuku actual fiancés, or is it an elaborate inside joke? Honestly, he should have been expecting this question since he heard them all the way back in their first week of classes. It is mostly the second one. Mostly, he could see Ajiro mouth the words out of the corner of his eye in response to his answer. He turned to look away from the blonde to observe the forest that was slowly becoming more and more dark as the sun set. The lush greenery drew his eyes to the natural floral, decorating the ground with bushes and bristles all scattered about. There was something peaceful even though they were waiting to walk into their next scare checkpoint. Honestly, this would be a nice place to just camp normally outside of the training camp. What's that? Ajiro's voice interrupted the beginning of his daydream. The fear in his voice caused him to turn his head quickly to see that Ajiro's trembling finger was pointing towards the direction they had just come from. Ida frowned at the sight that Ajiro was pointing at, a slowly moving wall of gas creeping past trees and through the tall grass and bushes. That's strange, there was no word on additional obstacles. And if it was a true obstacle, wouldn't it have activated for them as well? Was this a delayed attempt or something else? Ajiro quickened his pace, an action that he quickly copied since the mysterious gas seemed to be getting closer with each step they took. His partner swished his tail behind him as they started to briskly jog away from the approaching smoke. Ajiro asked, "Do any of the Class 1B students have a quirk like this?" "No," he quickly replied. Yaoyorozu and him had looked over the quirks and names before to make sure they could be in somewhat good standing with the other hero students. "Students, find a safe place. This is an emergency." Mandalay's words ran through their heads, which caused both of them to stop in their tracks. Ida looked over to his partner and saw the shock through his eyes. "A fire has broken out in the forest and there are villains being reported in the area. We give you permission to use your quirks to defend yourselves." Ida breathed in deeply. "Villains are in the forest, there is a gas creeping up behind us, and there was a fire that would no doubt spread through the trees. Great, what's the best course of action here? What should be prioritized?" Ajiro started to pick up his pace, which is an action that he quickly copied. The last thing they needed was to find out what that gas would do to them. Ajiro asked, "Do we try to head back to the camp?" "No," Ida quickly denied that option. "There is a strong possibility that villains might be attacking the heroes near the camp. What other way would they know that villains are attacking?" "Damn it," Ajiro cursed under his breath. His partner turned to him with an expectant look. "Then what's our next step, class president?" "Well, our classmates might need our help, but our first step is to run." Ida can tell how fast that gas was spreading out. The only way to outrun it is using his engines at this point. With that thought in mind, he quickly bowed to Ajiro and positioned his arms. "Excuse me." Ajiro yelped as Ida picked up his classmate with a smooth move. Ida used the power in his legs to sprint as fast as he could away from the approaching danger. "Our classmates might be facing off against villains, so we must do our part and help them," Ida added as Ajiro clung to him like his arms were Velcro. Ajiro nodded, then his eyes widened and he pointed to an area ahead of them and slightly to the right. "There, over there, I think I saw a glimpse of something." Ida pivoted his feet slightly to rush to the spot that his partner was guiding him towards. "Let's go then." Ida almost shouted it out before lowering his volume to avoid gaining too much attention to their area. Shinso wanted to say that he wasn't tired. He wanted to be the epitome of a perfectly active hero in training, but he won't lie. After 3 straight days of non-stop training his quirk while pushing his body to the limit, he was not feeling at the top of his game. He was following as close to Izuku as he could, but his lungs felt like it was going to burst out of his ribs. "Meat delicious flesh." That sounds like a villain, and from the look on Izuku's face, he noticed that too. The green-haired teen looked over his shoulder to say, "Come on, Ragdoll could be around there." "Oh great, they're going towards the villain. That sounds like they want to eat them. Super, that sounds fantastic." Shinso followed after Izuku despite not so reassuring thoughts. "Back away, Ragdoll's unmistakable voice yelled out. At the sound of her shout, both teens pivoted to run in her direction to help her with whatever she needed since it sounded like she was fighting against the strange-sounding villain. "What are you and whatever team you have doing here?" "Flashy." It didn't take long for them to find Ragdoll and the villain that they heard. When they got there, they found the teal-haired pro-hero fighting with all her might with blood running down her arm. It looked like a small chunk of skin had been carved out of her. And that answer was quite clear when he saw the look of the opponent she was facing off against. The villain looked like he was fresh out of an asylum with metal teeth that extended out like long knives. Those long teeth shot out from its mouth and reached towards the heroes with sudden movements that stuck itself in the ground around the pro-hero or in her at several areas on her limbs. "Auntie," Izuku whispered out as they both watched Ragdoll struggle against the metal tooth that made a particular slice down her calf. They have to do something. Ragdoll was injured and he did not feel qualified enough to deal with this type of villain head-on even with Izuku's smarts. This was going to push him into migraine territory, especially after all of this hectic training. But he had to. Shinso reaches out to Izuku and held onto his shoulder to preemptively stop him from moving towards Ragdoll. "Hey, Tooth Fairy!" Shinso shouted out, making both the horrified pro-hero and scary villain turn towards Izuku and him. The villain cocked his head to the side with some of his metal teeth retreating back to his mouth to respond. "New flesh." Shinso grabbed onto the metal control immediately. The villain snapped to attention with those signature glazed eyes that he knew was a good sign. Shinso focused, then started to order the villain. Retract your teeth back into your mouth and start running away from here. Don't bump into any trees. Go towards the civilian road and wait for authorities to arrive. Who was that? Shinso asked, gazing out to the disappearing figure of the villain who was sprinting as fast as someone in a very tight costume could go. Moonfish, he is one of the mid-tier villains that I know of. Ragdoll breathed in deeply with gritted teeth. She immediately reached into her tool belt to retrieve a small first aid kit to start treating the bigger wounds she sustained from the fight. But why is he here, and why is there a forest fire? It's most likely the League, Izuku answered, stepping forward to help Ragdoll with her wounds. Shinso followed his action. Ragdoll stood unsteadily on her legs with Izuku taking care of her calf and Shinso treating her cut-up shoulder. Izuku continued, we ran away from some smoke that was filling up the area. There could be a lot more villains in the forest that are spread out. Oh goodness, Ragdoll replied, winced when Sino accidentally made the bandage a bit too tight. He apologized quickly, which made the pro-hero reassure him with a strained smile. It's all good, little cat, it's just a flesh wound, Ragdoll sighed. You two should wait here for now. I need to go get Koda, then we can all head back to the camping grounds. It sounded like a bad idea, especially in her condition. The injuries weren't terrible, but if she had to fight again, it could end badly. Shinso bit down on his lip as he finished up with wrapping her bite wound. Izuku placed the last pieces of the medical items he didn't use back inside the kit. Ragdoll closed the kit and shined it back into the pocket of the belt around her skirt. Izuku shook his head, waving his hands side to side calmly in order to disagree. We're already on our way to Koda. If anything, the students back at the camp will need you more. Izuku explained, then gestured down to her newly treated wounds. Plus, you are injured, so you need to get better medical attention back at the grounds as quickly as you can. Ragdoll shook her head furiously with a frown. No, I won't leave you two behind in all of this mess, especially since we don't know what's happening. Auntie Ragdoll, Izuku started to reassure his aunt gently. Izuku looked a bit frantic while bounding on the balls of his feet while he talked with Ragdoll. Koda is probably hiding away in his cave. There might be a chance that there is a villain, but he could be completely away from sight. Are you sure you'll be okay? Ragdoll frowned, turning her head to where that weird cannibalistic villain had disappeared into the forest due to his command. He would need to let go of his mental control soon. The headache was starting to grow, but he needed to let the villain wander a little while longer until well after all three of them had left the scene unless they wanted to deal with him again. I don't feel comfortable leaving both of you alone in this kind of situation. We'll be fine, Auntie. Izuku tried to reassure her with that trademark smile he had seen way too many times in the hero training class. As soon as I get to Koda, we'll head right back to the camp. All right, fine, Ragdoll reluctantly said with a sigh as she adjusted her broken cat ears on her head. She pointed at Izuku with a particular stare. But please be quick and stay safe. I would hate to get on your dad's bad side. Don't worry, I won't let it come to that. Izuku waved off her worries while she started to jog away from them. Now go, Izuku yelled out before his smile dropped suddenly. No, wait. Ragdoll quickly came to a stop and whipped her head around. Izuku called out loudly to her, which did not help his continued focus on the villain's kind. Watch out for the gas. The fumes shouldn't reach you if you go the other way around, since the gas seems to be mostly affecting the returning side. Got it, Ragdoll replied before taking off in a sprint through the trees with practiced ease. They both watched the teal-haired hero dodge around the nature around them and head towards the camping grounds. A sharp cracking sound made Shinso whip his head around to see Izuku snapping a red feather in half with a blank expression. He let go of the brightly colored feather and let it drift to the ground with his mouth set in a tense line. Shinso looked back down at the discarded red feather that now laid in two pieces at their feet. With a sigh, he finally let go of the mental control hold he was keeping on Moonfish. As long as the villain didn't run into a tree, he would keep running for a while. Shinso looked to Izuku, who turned on his heel in a hurry like he was about to launch into a sprint towards the mountain, but the other did not get a chance to move before he asked, "Why did you break a feather?" Izuku straightened up and glanced back at him, then the feather. "I'm calling in for backup." The green-haired teen looked towards the sky like the feather was an immediate summoning circle, then lowered his gaze when all that answered was a darkening sky. If we are dealing with the League of Villains yet again, or completely different ones, we need more heroes on the scene to help out. Where would he get a red feather? The birds around here didn't have that color anywhere in their wings, and why would he break it so fiercely with a serious look? Shinso searched his mind for some kind of explanation that could explain the situation clearly. The image of the red-winged hero that he spotted out the classroom's window, the same one who had feathers that looked exactly the same as the one on the ground. Hawks, at the sound of the name, Izuku gazed back at him with raised eyebrows. The feather, it would explain why he broke it. Hawks had said a few times in interviews that he could feel his feathers in some way and most of all could tell when they broke. I thought I saw him before on campus. Yeah, some tension in Izuku's shoulders lessened. He said if I got in trouble then he would respond. Izuku clicked his tongue. Hopefully he is as smart as I know he is, because we need him to call in extra heroes onto the scene to deal with this quickly. There's no more time to talk like this. Shinso watched as Izuku rolled his head around his shoulders and stretched out his arms. We have to get to Kota and get him safe. Those green eyes pinned him down where he stood amidst the grass and rocks. Come on, I know you are probably tired of this, but we have to make sure he's not in danger. With that, Izuku started to lead the way by starting to run with the exact pace as before while dodging the thick trunks of the trees. Shinso cursed under his breath while he started to run after Izuku who, thankfully, slowed down enough so they could match pace. Shinso heaved a deep breath and tried to ignore the thrum in his legs. He called out to Izuku as they rushed towards the mountain. My legs might be burning, but I'm not going to just leave a kid out here. Good, Izuku yelled back to him with an unsteady smile, his curly hair bouncing with his determined stride. He continued talking out loud to him. Keep your eyes and ears out. Moonfish might not be the only one in this section of the forest. If this is an attack, they could be anywhere in this forest. What happens if we run into one? If that happens, we could do the same thing as before if there is a need. You can use your voice on them to stop them, and I'll take care of the rest. Shinso blinked. Maybe it was just the fact they were running and he was out of breath and upset at the whole situation. But seriously, that's the entire plan. He was already feeling the overuse of his quirk affecting his head right now. Slowly, he said, that's an idea. Just give me a few minutes and I'll come up with a better one. Izuku threw his hands up in the air for a brief moment with a groan. He glanced back at him over his shoulder to address him directly as he continued talking. Any small plan, even half-formed, is better than rushing in with nothing. If anything, I can give you a distraction while getting you into the best place to use your quirk, or if you can't, I can. In the middle of his explanation, Izuku had a perplexing look across his face. Something flickered across his expression as the other teen slowed down his pace severely to a point where the two of them were now at more of a brisk walk. He got closer to Izuku when his words developed into mumbles that he could barely hear until a certain phrase caught his attention. Unless I, poison. Poison? Shinso whispered out of shock. Why was Izuku talking about poison now? Did he bring some with him in his luggage? What was happening? His thoughts only continued to derail when Izuku ignored his reaction and started to calmly jog away from the path to the mountain. Now it looked like he was skipping. Wait, where are we going? The mountain is up ahead. Shinso rushed up to Izuku, trying and failing to ignore the burning sensation in his legs. After all of the training from Aizawa, this camp from hell is really pushing him to the brink. Every hero needs a backup plan. Izuku replied that the sentiment would somehow answer all of his questions. There was a glint in those green eyes that he could see even with the minimal amount of light in this goddamn forest, and I'm not about to be unprepared. Shinso's eyes widened as he watched Izuku aim his sights on flowering bushes ahead of them. Damn, he does not like the sight of this. He does not think he is ready in any way, share or form to be an accomplice if Izuku ends up killing someone. But this was Izuku he was talking about, so maybe he could. A sharp sting, nothing that painful to break his concentration, was just enough to draw his attention. Hawks felt it immediately when he was gliding down to a rooftop. When he landed, he hurriedly searched his wings for the disturbance only to feel that the pang was far away from him. The winged pro-hero turned to gaze out the city towards the place where the sun had fallen below the horizon less than an hour ago. That kid must have broken the feather. It was summer and most hero schools were doing programs to keep their students vigilant. Shiketsu had a boarding camp type of outing, and he heard Ketbetsu had a team-building-based program down in the countryside. UA must be doing some summer training deep in the forest then based on the distance. If that's the case, something bad must have happened. Hawks weighed his options, moving his gloved hands up and down like a scale midair. Boss or Nezu, boss or Nezu. Hawks bit his lip. This had to do with a student, so Nezu it was. Hawks made a beeline for UA with his wings spread wide in the darkening sky. The wind whipped against his face as he raced towards the school principal's office like a fire was licking at the tip of his feathers. He stopped just short of the window where the principal was sitting at his desk typing at something on his computer. Those eyes trained on the screen until his taps on the glass made the chimera get up without a single flinch in his position. Hawks waited at the window until the chimera opened up the glass for him to glide into the room. "Hello, Hawks," Principal Nezu greeted with that same calm smile. His black beady eyes stared into him like he was about to go into interrogation mode on why he was waiting outside his window. "What brings you here today?" Hawks breathed out as he watched the chimera reach for and grab a teacup from his desk. He spoke right as the cup's rim touched Nezu's mouth. "Your UA hero class is in trouble." Nezu froze before he could take a sip of tea. The chimera gaze landed on him, not breaking eye contact as the principal placed the cup back on its coaster. "What?" Nezu's words felt like a weighted weapon ready to strike him in the moth room. Hawks could just feel the sweat gathering from the tension in the air. "I gave one of my feathers to the green-haired kid in the hero class. The one named Midoriya." Nezu stared at him even harder if that was possible. "And I felt it break just a few minutes ago." Hawks watched the principal, who looked tense. Actually, tense was too lenient of a definition, but there was no time to stall any longer. If the hero class was in danger, he needed to act fast with the chimera. The blonde added, "Since this concerns your students, I wanted to let you know to consider what the next point of action should be." Principal Nezu did not twitch or react as openly as many other people under his eye did. If anything, he looked like a focused statue with a single move of his ears moving back from his face. Nezu hummed, "I will alarm the staff about the possible danger and order them to go directly to the site." Nezu glanced away for a moment to stare once again at his screen. Hawks tracked how his pupils moved slowly like it was following an object moving on his screen. Then that eye contact with the screen broke as those beady eyes stared into his soul. "Hawks." "Yes," Hawks replied, shifting his feet when Nezu's eyes shined with something as that classic smile was aimed at him. Nezu leaned forward over his desk and propped up his short arms on the desk's surface. He rested his head on his positioned paws and tilted his head. "I will need your assistance as well."